Jaron Jarvis Channel, Top 20 Scary Stories of the Day from Reddit nosleep. 2018-08-25. Story 1, I was a serial killer's babysitter. It was the summer of 1999. In our little town of Hope Valley in western Maryland, the scariest things we could imagine were Y2K, The Sixth Sense, and the Blair Witch Project. I mean, Burkittsville was only about 25 miles away, those kids looked just like us, and the film they shot was almost as poor quality as our AV club. Nobody told us it wasn't real. And nobody told us there was a serial killer in our county. We had to figure both of those things out for ourselves. I blame the police for the fact that nobody knew, but the reporters at the Herald played a big part in confusing and distorting what facts there were. By the time September rolled around and school started, there had been 4 murders in 3 months. Most people only knew about 2 of them, though. The paper reported them as suicides over a business deal gone wrong, so nobody paid much attention. I was starting 11th grade and could not have cared less. I was obsessed with Anthony Kiedis, Dave Grohl, and saving up enough money to get into a good university far, far away. Babysitting was my mission. I won't bore you with the details, suffice to say I had it down to a science, and I always had as much business as I could handle. I had to stay home with my sisters when my parents went bowling, so on Fridays, I ran a drop-off service. The first Friday of that school year, I had 2 new kids. One was Asher Mason, our new neighbor's sweet, severely asthmatic 3-year-old. The other was 4-year-old Bradley Vale from further down the street, not so sweet, but nothing I couldn't handle. Bradley came with an unexpected extra, the Vale's Greek exchange student. Allison, Mrs. Vale said, "You know Nicholas, don't you?" Our school was tiny, she knew I did. My eyes narrowed. "What's up, Nick?" I asked. He told everyone he went by Nico with a long E sound at home, but we all just called him Nick. He's only been in the country a few months, Mrs. Vale said, and we don't like to leave him at home all by himself. He won't be any trouble. You don't mind if he stays here with Bradley, do you? Nick had enough sense to look ashamed. I thought about it, then held out my hand. $20, and $1 every 5 minutes if you're late, just like Bradley. She hesitated. Take it or leave it. Sounds harsh, but in this business, it's the only way. She handed me a $20 like it was her last savings and walked off without a word. Nick was actually good with the kids. Even better, my sisters thought he was weird, so we hardly saw them the whole time. He mostly kept to himself, working in his battered sketchbook. I noticed his English was a lot better than he let on at school, and I asked him about it as I cut carrots for the kids' dinner. "Well, my English isn't perfect," he said, "so if I pretend it's a lot worse, it saves embarrassment when I make a mistake, yeah?" He was standing by the dining room window. "I wonder why your neighbor leaves all his lights on while their daughter is with you and they go out." It did look like every light in their house was on. I shrugged. As long as they pay me at the end of the night, that's all that matters. Maybe they went out to the disco. Do you like to go to disco, Ali? My uncle knows all the best discos in Washington, D.C. He started doing some kind of bizarre Euro dance moves. Nick, just set the table, please, and go pause the VHS. He was weird, but like harmless weird. He genuinely cared for Bradley and he didn't try to make a move on me or anything. Still, I was glad when they were all gone. Most of my friends were probably out spending money somewhere, and here I was, $70 richer. In those days, that would buy a college textbook with change left over. Asher was back the following Friday, and so was Bradley. After her previous performance, I had to yank Mrs. Vale's chain just a little. "Nick doesn't need a sitter tonight?" she sighed. "No, he's with his uncle in D.C. this weekend." She obviously disapproved of the uncle, the situation, or both. It was a normal, boring, slow, totally average weekend for everyone in our little, boring town. Everyone, that is, except the lady who was found dead in her garage Saturday morning, rolled up tight in a heavy plastic tarp where she'd suffocated. People were talking about it in the school hallway on Monday. "Did you know the police are calling it suicide?" Jeremy Tanner was saying. That kid loved to hear himself talk. Who the EFF commits suicide by rolling themselves up in plastic and not trying to roll back out? Everyone had an opinion to add. She got stuck. It was her husband. A boyfriend. The mob. I bet she smoked the cocaine. The lady was a county commissioner or official of some kind. Who knows what people with positions like that get themselves into? I just shook my head and went on to my first class. Later that week, the 2 deaths the Herald had reported in August came back into the rumor mill. One of the men, who had owned a trucking company, was found drowned in a big bucket of white paint. The other, an investment banker, had been found hanged in his attic with a chalk line. Like the dead lady, both victims were found in their own homes on a late Friday or early Saturday. Their families were at home, nobody heard anything, and there were no signs of forced entry or a struggle. These details hadn't been in the paper, they came courtesy of another school big mouth, Trevor Maines, whose dad was an assistant coroner. And there's more, Trevor told our whole lunch table. In July, they found a guy who'd burned through the roof of his mouth with a propane torch. And before that, in June, this other guy died with a socket wrench extender pushed through his eyeball and into his brain. Leslie Peters choked on her soda. None of us believed him. Both the first 2 guys were rich as crap, and their families kept their deaths quiet, he went on. They're in the police records, look them up. But this is the really messed up part, all 5 of these deaths recorded as suicide. I'm not joking, that's what the reports say. My dad doesn't buy it, but they don't listen to him. He thinks somebody's covering something up. Like what? Jeremy asked. I bet it was some kind of turf war over drugs. Trevor rolled his eyes. Man, this ain't law and order up in here. There was 0 evidence of an attacker in all 5 cases. I sneaked in my dad's study and looked at the actual reports. But you just can't do this kind of stuff to yourself, a blowtorch in your own mouth, are you serious? Trevor lowered his voice and looked around. Nobody on the force believes it, either. They say it's either a professional, or a serial killer who knows an awful lot about cleaning up a work site. Jeremy nodded. A professional? That's how the drug kingpins do it. But hold on, Trevor said. A professional is gonna bring his own weapon, right? He's not going to leave it to chance. These people were all killed with common tools lying around in their own houses, all the tools and stuff belonged to the dead people. He let that sink in. Sheriff's office even has a name for him, now. Everyone was quiet, they call him the handyman killer. I thought that was pretty corny, but people loved it. The name and the prospect of a Hope Valley area serial killer were all over town in less than a day. Rumors and gossip were out of control. I knew one thing for sure, I would not have wanted to be a handyman anywhere in Washington County that week. Friday evening came as usual for mid-September, with the distant visceral roar of supercharged engines at Hagerstown Speedway floating gently on the warm breeze. Bradley and Nick walked over on their own that day. Nick shrugged and handed me the cash for both of them. I'll just sketch at the table, okay? He asked. Far out, I replied, and let them in while I waited for Asha. Her mom fussed over the child's inhaler and chamber combo. It's okay, I reassured her, we'll do it twice tonight, and I know she'll be a big girl and breathe in all of her medicine. Won't you, sweetheart? I took Asha and her bag of supplies inside. After sundown, I noticed Nick staring out the window toward the neighbor's house. Ali, why do you think they leave all the lights on? He asked me. Nobody at my home would do this. It's just weird. Speak for yourself, I thought. But all I said was, maybe they're afraid of burglars. Nick shook his head. No, with burglars, the outside light is best. But they don't have outside lights on, only inside. I went back to getting Asha's inhaler ready. Nick stood up. It's really weird, you know? I'm going to have a look. Nick, you can't just go in someone's yard and peek in their windows. I'm too curious now to do drawings and homework. Just a little look. Nick went out the patio door without another word. No, come back, I called after him. No answer. At least close the door? Asha stared silently out the window during her treatment and after. She ignored my attempts to interest the kids in a game of perfection until Nick came back. He sat down next to me on the sofa, his eyes wide. "So weird," he said in a low voice. "Your neighbor is there, in his basement. Just him in this little room where he stands, making these kinds of moves." Nick stood up and tried to show me what he'd seen, like he's doing Tai Chi. Nick didn't answer. "You know, it's this series of moves you do." "I know what Tai Chi is," Nick snapped. "I'm from Athens, not Albania. But that's not the same as what your neighbor does." Outside the house, though, there was something else. Nick stared over my shoulder. Like somebody was out there. Watching me, but couldn't be seen. Calling to me, but I couldn't hear. Like a bad dream, you know? I didn't want to hear, so I got out of there. The doorbell rang just then, and Nick almost jumped out of his skin. I laughed at him and went to the door. Asha's dad had come to pick her up early. "Allison," he asked as I gathered her things, "we came back to our house on the way here, and I thought I caught a glimpse of somebody in the yard. About a foot taller than you, maybe. Have you seen anything unusual outside?" I tried to hide my mortification by looking around toward the dining room window. Nick was nowhere in sight. No, I haven't," I said. It would be perfectly natural to sound nervous, I thought, after hearing somebody was prowling around outside. "But I'll definitely watch out, that's creepy." Nick was only a couple inches taller than me, but I wasn't going to argue the point. "You do that," he said. "There've been some weird things going on lately." He was looking toward our back hallway, but didn't say anything more. I told him Asha had been super good and had taken her inhaler twice, and they went home. Nick came out of the bathroom a minute later and started picking up his books and Bradley's things. "That guy is really weird," Nick said, looking out the window. "Do not trust him. We're going now, too." I heard Bradley crying all the way down the block as they walked home. The handyman killer was still on everyone's mind the next week, but after days of aimless speculation, the rumors died down. The next weekend went just the same as the last, except that I threatened to tell Mrs. Vale if Nick so much as thought about going outside. October came, bringing a welcome change from the summer heat and another Friday night, without Nick, this time, courtesy of his uncle in D.C. That Sunday after dinner, Dad excitedly called us all into the family room. "Guys, look, we're on the Channel 4 News. Jim Vance is talking about Hope Valley right now. Come on." Our familiar evening news anchor was narrating a full-screen video taken from a helicopter earlier that day. The video showed a big mansion with expansive grounds and horses in the pasture. According to local police, Vance was saying, the man was a fund manager with ties to real estate agencies and several local charities. He was found this morning in his home by his family when they returned from a vacation, dead in an apparent drill press accident. Authorities reported finding no signs of foul play and are at this time regarding his death as accidental, or possibly a suicide. I have to stop for the night. I'm close, now, so close. Writing is all that keeps me sane while I wait. Story 2, Eviction Notice. I know they say kids do dumb things, but I was really an idiot in college. Instead of focusing on my studies or taking anything even remotely serious, I chose to party, binge drink, and experiment with every illegal drug in America. When I flunked out, broke and remorseless, my parents refused to help me out. Unable to keep even the simplest job, I soon found myself homeless at age 20. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Being homeless was the darkest stage of my life. Having to beg for money, stealing food from supermarkets, and smelling like shit wrapped in failure, all while being exposed to the elements, was no joke. Still, despite the despair, I wasn't alone throughout it all. I eventually made a companion, a stray mutt that for some reason took on to me. He was as haggard as I was, with matted black fur and big chocolate eyes. It was hard enough feeding myself, but taking care of this creature soon became my only goal in life. I fell in love and named him Prowler. Prowler and I roamed together, discovering both the good and the cruelties of the world. Though I loved Prowler to death, I hated myself more and more with each passing day. Then the note came. I had been sleeping under a bridge, Prowler curled up tightly next to me. I awoke, yawning as I stretched and wiped my eyes. I heard a strange rustling sound as I did so and, looking down, noticed a dirty, ripped piece of paper taped to my chest. I was confused. How could someone have gotten so close without Prowler and I noticing? I picked the paper up and read the sloppy writing aloud. You have been issued an eviction notice. You have 6 days to vacate your dwelling or else offer restitution. This was obviously some random fucker's joke. Hilarious. I balled the paper up, tossed it aside, and whistled for Prowler. It was time to get moving. 2 days and several miles later, in a completely different part of town, I woke to the sound of Prowler growling. I awoke to find him staring at me, his ears fully erect. "What is it, boy?" That was when I noticed another sheet of paper. "You have been warned. You now have 4 days to either vacate your dwelling or offer restitution." What the actual fuck, I muttered out loud. How the hell had this fucker found me again? I stood up, searching my immediate vicinity. I was in a secluded foresty area, well away from the views of anyone on the road. We are being followed, I concluded, wondering what the fuck this psycho wanted. I became paranoid, and paid a great attention to my surroundings when I traveled now. Prowler and I pushed on, never staying in one spot for too long. I soon found myself close to my old neighborhood, something that had been completely unintentional. I pondered visiting my parents to ask for help, but I figured I had managed to lose the stalker. I got my 1-day notice promptly. This time, though, the stalker had also left an old, yet still sharp dagger lying on my chest as well. I was terrified beyond belief. I only had 1 day left, and now the fucker was physically threatening me. I only had one option. I swallowed my pride, because all I had now was fear. I lumbered up my old driveway and knocked loudly on the door of the house I had grown up in. My dad stuck his head out and inspected me, a look of utter disgust on his face. "Can I help you, sir?" I was appalled. He didn't even recognize me. "Dad, it's me." My father's disgust worsened, if it was even possible. He shook his head, his eyes full of resentment. "Go away. You are not welcome here." "Dad, I need help. Someone's trying to kill me," I begged, tears forming in my eyes for the first time in years. My father's expression did not soften. "I am not surprised. Now leave before I call the cops." "But I'm your son." "I have no son." He slammed the door in my face. Next to me, Prowler growled. Dejected and listless, I wondered what would come tomorrow. I came up with the decision to stay awake all night. When the stalker came, I would be ready for him. I guess I really did care about living after all. I was fighting sleep several hours after midnight when I first saw it. There was what I can only describe as a shadow floating several feet above the ground. It was drifting, almost gracefully, towards me with no physical being accompanying it. Surely I was hallucinating from exhaustion. I wiped my eyes and looked down at Prowler, who was fast asleep. That was when I heard the voices in my head. "We've come to collect what you do not want. What are you? Am I going crazy? It does not matter who we are. You care not about your life, so we will be taking it. But I do care, I do. You must offer suitable restitution." Their voice was like a dozen snakes hissing in unison. I looked down at Prowler, who was still snoring peacefully, completely unaware of what was happening. I picked up the knife, now realizing what they wanted me to do. A sacrifice had to be made. That was almost 2 years ago. Having nearly been literally to hell and back, I am much more appreciative of my life now. I have a suitable job, a girl who I might marry one day, and the first love of my life, Prowler, who still sleeps by my side every night. You see, my parents didn't have much, but when they were found brutally stabbed to death, their earnings had to pass on somewhere. Lucky me. Story 3, Doctor's Notes. I cannot share all the details of what happened on March 3, 2018. As a doctor, I'm not allowed to share certain private details. Surnames have been changed and I do not mention what hospital I worked at the time. There has to be some sort of logical explanation as to what happened. So far, I haven't come up with any. Here are my notes I took that night. 3 people are dead because of that woman's presence. And I need to find a reason why so I can continue going on with life. Everything has to have a rational reason. Or so I thought. _ 6:29 p.m. Jane Doe was brought in about 10 minutes prior. Age is somewhere in her early 20s. She would be quite tall when standing, almost 6'2". She's African American with 2 mirror injuries between her shoulder blades. The skin has been taken clean off and seems to be done expertly. I believe someone may have been trying to skin her, possibly to hide an identifying mark like a tattoo. Jane Doe was found walking naked down a street in a daze. She was found by 2 young women who took her immediately to the emergency room. By the time they reached it, Jane was unconscious and unresponsive. I hold high hopes for her recovery, as other than the injuries on her back, she seems to be perfectly healthy. 7:01 p.m. Had to calm down Derek Peterson again. Peterson woke up screaming about demons and had to be given a sedative. He really needs a transfer to a proper mental ward, but his parents only want him to be treated for his injuries before he's sent home. Like this time and every other time. 8:09 p.m. Jane Doe has awoken. She seems to be all right in mind but claims to not remember who she is and what happened to her. I have reason to believe she's lying, but it appears she's gone through some form of trauma and I don't believe she's ready to relive it. I've ordered a rape kit, but she doesn't appear to show the typical signs of sexual assault other than being found nude. The storm is picking up. I'm going to get a migraine from this. 8:38 p.m. Jane Doe somehow escaped from her room and ended up in the room of Agnes Church. She was sitting by the elderly woman and stroking her hand, almost comfortingly. I managed to guide Jane back to her room and apologized to Agnes, but Agnes had already fallen back asleep. I imagine that's really all that's left for her, sleep. Jane has been put back in her room and I've assigned a nurse to her door. We can't have her wandering around the hospital, she could hurt herself. 8:55 p.m. Agnes passed away not 5 minutes ago. I cannot seem to shake off this odd chill about the uncanny timing of her meeting Jane and her death, but it is circumstantial. Agnes hasn't been right for days. I knew her end was coming soon. I'll miss playing board games with her on the weekends. If there's a heaven, she's likely playing Yahtzee with the angels now and somehow winning every time, even if it is a luck game. 9:23 p.m. Jane got out of her room again. The nurse left to use the bathroom and by the time she got back Jane was gone. Because she was in my office. She's incredibly sweet. All she wanted to tell me was that she remembered her name Leah. I am not the kind of man to get so captivated with his patients, but something about Leah tugs at my heart. I suppose she reminds me of my sister before the cancer weakened her spirit. I took Leah back to her room and told her that she shouldn't leave until we can find someone she knows. She seemed mildly agitated with this but she did not object. 10:42 p.m. Derek passed away. This shouldn't have happened. One moment he was enjoying TV while chattering the ear off of the nurse who was checking his bandages when, as she describes, the eyes rolled back in his skull and he fell backwards, choking and thrashing about. We tried to save him but he was gone within minutes. It was like his body just ceased. I'm going over his treatment, but he wasn't allergic to any of the medications we gave him and other than his mental disorders he was perfectly healthy. Leah tried to get out during the chaos but I managed to catch her before she left her wing. She said she wanted outside for a breath of fresh air but I have no doubt if she leaves this hospital we will never see her again. We're still trying to get a positive ID on her. There are no girls in the area matching her description with the name Leah who have been reported missing. We might have to widen our search. The storm's only getting worse. I think there's something wrong with the air because I've had no less than 2 bloody noses tonight and my head is pounding. 11:01 p.m. Once again Leah tried to escape. She's begged to be released and claims she remembers how to get home but she cannot name an address nor any relatives who can pick her up. She still doesn't remember her own surname. The police here now are trying to ID her. I just got word. She escaped again. 11:32 p.m. Leah was found attempting to get to the roof. She claims that's the way home. We've now had to restrain her to the bed as she is now classified as suicide risk. Officer Matthew Reynolds said she had taken off her hospital gown and was about to jump when he tackled her. I'm thankful she didn't succeed with her attempt to kill herself, but I'm worried she'll try again. 11:45 p.m. Reynolds is dead. He just dropped in the hallway. Just like Derek. I have an unsettling feeling that Leah may be connected to this. 12:01 a.m. The power was knocked out by the storm. We're running off of generators now. The lights are constantly flickering. 2 nurses have fainted, thankfully not dead, but both experiencing bloody noses and migraines. I can feel my own head start to pound. I swear there's blood pattering against the window, but that's impossible. I might need to go home. Or go to the emergency room. 12:33 a.m. Birds are flying into the windows. Like drawn to a beacon, they're flying to the building, smacking against the glass and falling to the ground dead. The sound certainly isn't helping my head. I need to talk to Leah, but I believe she's asleep and is under guard by 2 officers. It's foolish to believe that this girl could be causing such madness, but I don't know what else to think. 12:45 a.m. The officers have fallen unconscious and Leah is nowhere to be found. I'm checking the roof now. 1:12 a.m. Eligoni. SEFLWOA. 8:31 a.m. I was found on the roof unconscious shortly after I wrote that nonsense message in my notes. My face was apparently covered in blood and they thought I might be dead, but I survived the experience. Whatever that experience was, I must have hallucinated everything, but I shall take note of it anyway. I found Leah standing on the edge of the roof, once again nude and staring at the sky. She turned to look at me. "Will you stop me?" Her voice was hollow, tired. Lightning flashed and I swore I saw something on her back illuminated by the lightning. I tried to talk her down, show her there's a better way, but she shook her head. I have to try. I have to try to get home, doctor. This is the only way to see if I can still fly. She jumped then. I ran to the edge of the roof and peered over the ledge. I saw Leah's body on the ground. But I saw her also stand, brush herself off like she'd suffered a minor fall. She looked up at me and I became overwhelmed with grief. I wept. I cried as she raised her head to the sky and screamed at the top of her lungs. The sound of loss, the sound of heartbreak. I must have passed out then because that's all I remember. Thankfully I seem no worse for wear and will likely return to work in a few days. Leah is missing, but there is no sign of her body either. I think she's going to spend the rest of eternity trying to find a way home. Story 4, I am an exorcist. These are my most terrifying experiences. Demon. It's one of those words that doesn't really need a definition on the surface, because we all probably have some preconceived notion of what demons are, if you believe they exist at all. And you should, you absolutely should. Right this very moment, I can say with almost complete confidence that there is a demon lurking behind you. Can you feel it? It's watching you, and waiting. Plotting and scheming. Trust me when I say, it's there. If you're sensitive, you will feel it watching you late at night when it's dark and you're tired and alone. Demons are predators, and they have nothing else to do but focus on us. They try to influence us to do things that dims our light and feeds their darkness. That darkness leads to power and that power leads to their ability to take control of our bodies. I mentioned before that a demon's power ebbs and flows. Demons feed upon our negativity, such as hate, jealousy, envy, and fear. We act, speak, or think in such a way that allows them the opportunity to grow stronger and manifest themselves. If we continue down that path, eventually our light dissipates completely and we are left only with darkness. To every exorcism I take my King James Bible, long leather restraints, a decorative, and very old, stiletto, large light sticks, the kind you crack to light up, and an embroidered white cloth with strings on each corner. Holy water, candles, the use of Latin, special priestly garb, and crosses are all simply superstition. The faith of the exorcist operates in connection with these things, but they alone are irrelevant. The cross, for example, is actually a pagan symbol. My first experience with exorcism shook me to the core. Although I was only 19 at the time, if I think at any length about the experience, I still feel the same terror and dread well up inside of me. In fact, I'm shaking now just in preparation to tell this story. Only when Father James called me did I know he suspected a real possession. Late one Friday night, I got a call at 2 a.m. from Father James. He was at the home of a family whose 24-year-old daughter had been engaged in work as a psychic, also known as a medium, for several months. Earlier that evening, her mother heard loud screams and chanting in her bedroom, as well as things crashing against the walls. When she went in to see what the matter was, she found her daughter levitating about 3 feet off the floor. She was upside down, her body arched and stiffened, only making rigid and jerking movements in between, letting loose wild shrieks and manic laughing. "Robert, I'm sorry it's so late, but I have a case here that I need your help with." Father James had some hesitation in his voice. "You think I'm ready?" I stammered back, unsure of what was to come. "Only God knows that, but I would really appreciate having someone at my side." I felt a boost of confidence. "Will you come?" I had already gotten dressed while we were speaking. "I'm about to walk out the door." He gave me the address and I took off at my old Datsun 720 pickup. It took me about 35 nerve-wracking minutes to get to the home, and by that time, everything had gone wrong. Although I had learned so much over the few years preceding this experience, nothing could really have prepared me. I knocked on the door, but got no answer, and could hear nothing going on inside the house. It was a dark night, with no moon, or any light whatsoever, save for the faintly glowing street lamps behind me. After only a minute, I decided to try the door, and luckily, it was unlocked. I slowly stepped inside the foyer, and from there could see down the hall in front of me, although it was eerily dark. "Hello?" I called out somewhat loudly, thinking that perhaps I had the wrong house. "Father James?" Walking forward several steps, I fumbled for a light switch on the wall. I flicked it on and nothing happened. I heard the low roar of a guttural laugh coming from the darkness ahead of me. I glanced down the hallway, and while squinting my eyes, I could barely make out a light-colored dress worn by a figure at the end of the hallway. "Mom, I was called by Father J." She cut me off. "Father James, Father James." "Ah yes, Father James." "My new friend." Her extremely high-pitched voice rang out, like a young child. She shrieked a maniacal cackle that petrified my feet in place. I touched my throat, but it was growing tighter, and I couldn't speak. I opened my mouth as if to try and speak again, but nothing came out. The laugh came again. It started at that same high pitch, but dramatically changed to a hoarse, deep sound, like a large man. "Father James is none of your concern. I think I will make him mine," the cavernous male voice bellowed out. Without warning she released an awful wail and flew at me from down the hall, my eyes now more adjusted to the darkness. She moved too fast for me to react, at impressive speed, floating through the air, as her feet did not touch the ground. She plowed into me, slamming me backward into the door with astounding force. I felt a snap in my back just below my right shoulder blade, and my left elbow was on fire with pain. She held me there for a moment, both hands on my chest. "I bet you'd like to lick my tits, wouldn't you? You naughty pervert. I know what you're thinking." She brought her nose only inches from mine and gave me an unnaturally wide grin. In a flash of motion both of her hands were around my throat, squeezing. I felt pressure build up behind my eyes and in my eardrums. I grabbed her wrists, but I was like an infant trying to pull away her otherworldly grip. My eyesight was fading quickly without oxygen, and I thought for a moment that I had no choice but to give in to the cold that was creeping up my feet and hands. At what seemed like only moments from losing consciousness, Father James appeared from behind her, placing her in a chokehold. She released my throat and howled in anger, and I slumped down and gasped for breath. My vision was still blurred, and my mind hazy as I tried to regain my wits about me. I gave several painful coughs while searing pain stabbed into my Adam's apple. Father James struggled with the girl as they fell to the ground. "Robert." The girl was clawing and pulling at his arms, fresh, deep lacerations oozing blood down his arm onto the girl's clothing. The table. Get the straps. My case. Her room. I bolted down the hall. Which one is her room? I barged into the first door on the right and frantically looked around in the dark. Hurry. I can't, Father James yelled from the entryway. It was dark and I was so worked up that I couldn't find it. Robert. He called again. I could hear the desperation in his voice. My foot kicked something, so I instinctually reached down. The case. I grabbed it and ran back out to the tussle. Take her feet. Father James ordered. She kicked and squealed in her high-pitched voice, let me go. She grunted and lashed back and forth and yelled it again. This time it sounded hoarse and violent, deep like a man's voice. Fucking let me go. I finally grabbed her feet, and Father James motioned to the table. Tie her feet first, then get her arms. I held her ankles together with one arm and pulled a robust leather strap from his bag. I cinched the strap around her feet before bringing it under the table and back up to cinch a second time. I grabbed another strap and was able to tie it around her wrist by forcing her arm straight out. I looped the strap under the table, brought it up to the other side, and tied her other hand. Father James collapsed against the wall, dropped down onto a chair, and breathed heavily. I could now see a large cut on the side of his forehead and a significant amount of blood smeared down his face, cheek, and collar. The girl struggled in vain. I will kill you. I will fucking kill you both. She ranted and banged her body against the table several times before arching her back abnormally high and slamming it again back down. Put the veil on her. Father James said calmly, now dabbing the blood with a handkerchief. I took the large white cloth from his case. I fastened it around her neck first, then brought the cloth up over her face and down the back of her head, fastening the other side also around her neck. Oh, you think I can't see you? I can see you. I can see everything. I don't need these eyes. I don't fucking need these eyes. I will gouge them out. She continued to scream and howl and jerk her body to and fro. He motioned for me to sit down and silently mouthed for me to keep quiet. The girl continued her ranting and screaming while we sat there for what seemed like eternity, saying nothing, just watching her, letting the demon waste his endurance. Slowly she stopped screaming and struggling. She no longer slammed her body down on the table. She's keeping the lights off. Father James made a gesture toward the unlit light fixture above. Hand me my bag, would you? Father James pulled a long glow stick from his bag, cracked it, and shook it alive. He took an antique-looking blade from his bag and made 2 small incisions above both of her collarbones. She moaned and squirmed. I'm not leaving this one unless I take her with me. She's mine. I made her what she is. The girl's voice sounded dejected and disheartened. He handed me the light and he turned to the girl. Demon, reveal yourself. Tell me your name. Little whore. Little whore. I'm just a silly little whore. She shouted at the top of her lungs. Father James pulled out his Bible and began reading. She flailed wildly while screaming. He handed the Bible to me. Continue reading. I looked down and found that it was open to John chapter 10, about the good shepherd. To him the porter openeth, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calleth his own she interrupted me. Let me go, Robert. My Robert. Let me go and I'll fuck you so hard. Ha 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 ha. Oh, I'll fuck you. She stuck her tongue out and pushed against the cloth covering her face. I could already tell the demon was growing weaker. In the name of the Almighty, I command you to come out of her. Father James stood at the end of the table next to the girl's head. She howled that much more. The table began to shudder violently and slowly lifted off of the ground. Stand back. Father James yelled at me. He stepped back into a doorway and I stood just outside of the arch that led into the room. The table floated higher and higher and began to rotate slowly. It quickly picked up speed and soon was spinning out of control, smashing into things in the room. I command you to come out of her, you filthy, unclean one. Father James had his arms stretched out toward her. As soon as he finished speaking, the table froze in the air, then slammed down on the ground and broke apart. The girl, still tied to the mess below, arched her back and pulled in a forceful gasp. She went limp. A few moments later, she looked around at us, confused, and started to sob. We untied her and helped her to a chair. "Are you all right, dear?" Father James placed a hand on her shoulder. She nodded slightly and continued to cry. Story 5, I needed to fix my acne scars. All throughout my adolescence, I struggled with acne. It consumed my face, covering my skin with angry red welts and disgusting formations of skin and pus. I saw the way people's eyes lingered on it as they walked past, judging me, thinking I was dirty. The worst of it ringed my mouth and forehead, pushing the skin into painful blisters and cysts. Serious acne isn't just incredibly mentally taxing, it's physically painful too. Naturally, my self-confidence was shot to bits during my teenage years. High school was a very lonely time for me. I hadn't learned to approach people because the few times I had tried, I was met with at best, reluctance and skepticism, and at worst, ridicule and insults. Believe me, I tried every remedy there is out there, but all the creams and the gels and the medications did nothing to soothe the acne that was ruining not just my face but my life. I made it through high school, friendless and seriously lacking in social skills but otherwise relatively unscathed. I tried to accept the way I looked, to tell myself that it would disappear soon. I hoped fervently that one day I would awaken with a face free from acne, that as I became an adult this plague of sores would leave my life. Sadly, in a way, I was right. I just finished my second year of college. For the first time since I was 12, I have somewhat of a social life, in the form of my best friend Yeun. He looked through my appearance, never once commented on the way my skin looks or on how I obviously don't take care of myself, as so many classmates in school had been kind enough to tell me, repeatedly. We became fast friends and bonded over our hard but rewarding studies. We kept to ourselves and focused on our work, spending our free time gaming or taking walks through the city in the dead of night. It felt easy to be friends with Ye, and that made me wonder, how would it feel to get along easily with everyone, to not get judged before one word leaves your mouth. My first year of college was the happiest I'd been in a long time, but I did feel that something was missing. My acne was still raging throughout that first year, but as fall of sophomore year rolled around, it began to subside. You can imagine how ecstatic I felt as I watched the redness leach from my face, as I witnessed the cysts deflate. The elation was, however, brief. If I had thought the acne was atrocious, what lay in its wake was even worse. My face was incredibly pitted and scarred, more than I had ever imagined. There were great craters on my face, punctures and pockmarks and potholes. The scar tissue that lined my face made it look as if rats had chewed my face in my sleep. I'm a skinny guy, so whereas the acne had just blanketed my face, the scars and indentations it left emphasized the hollows in my cheeks. I looked old and sick and wrong, and I hated every goddamn dent that the acne had left on my face. I became obsessed with the scars, convincing myself that they were the root of all my problems. I tried to cover the scars and dark spots with makeup, but it did next to nothing to hide the pitted texture of the skin. I know next to nothing about makeup though, maybe that's why the shades I chose made me look like death warmed up. I tried everything then, creams and tea tree oil and slathering my face with coconut oil before I slept, but all that led to was me waking greasy and depressed, with no change in the scars. A few nights ago, I told Ye, in a fit of desperation, how deeply my scars were affecting me. He looked me in the eyes for a moment, as if coming to a decision. He nodded slightly to himself and then said somewhat sheepishly, "I know what you can do." He told me about a kind of South Korean shaman, a baeksu, a man who could fix any ailment. I respected Ye too much to show my disbelief, but as he continued, telling me about how the man had cured his aunt of her foot problems and his cousin of something or other, I began to tell myself that it wouldn't hurt to try. His rates were cheap, and he lived only a few subway stops away. At this point I was so desperate to look normal that I would have done next to anything, so I went ahead and let Ye schedule a meeting with this man who would supposedly cure me. The meeting was relatively uneventful. His apartment was ordinary and unimpressive. I sat in a rather hard chair and told him of my issues. He listened intently, not uttering a word until he was sure I was finished. Now, I don't know exactly what I was expecting, but what he recommended I do certainly wasn't it. Find one cockroach. Put on pillow before you sleep. When you wake up, skin is smooth. He nodded once before standing up to usher me out of his home. He almost had to push me out because I was becoming more and more irate, having hoped for some brilliant home remedy and being instead told to sleep next to vermin. I was pissed the entire way home, mentally tired and angry and disappointed. I sat outside on the steps that lead to my accommodation, trying to relax, to tell myself that I was stupid to get my hopes up. Suddenly I saw a cockroach scuttle across the step below me, unfortunately not an uncommon sight in my city. I lifted a foot to crush it before reconsidering. Ye, who I trust more than anyone, had been insistent that this guy was the real deal, that he really helped people. I sighed and picked up the insect. That was last night. Laying the still cockroach on my pillow, I felt more stupid than I ever have before, but I also felt incredibly drained, which is probably why I did it. I soon fell sound asleep. I awoke this morning, trying to block out the fact that I would probably be dealing with a roach infestation soon. Dumb, stupid, even moronic, they don't even come close to describing how I felt. That was until I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror as I rose from my bed and elation rushed through my veins. My skin, it was clear. It had worked. I could not believe my eyes. This was the best thing to ever happen to me. I went to the mirror for a closer inspection, to revel in the newfound smoothness of my skin. Except what I saw there is an image that has been seared onto my brain, something more repulsive than I ever could have imagined. My scars had not miraculously disappeared. Instead, each pockmark, each crater, had been filled with tiny, tiny cockroach eggs. Story 6, Stay away from Perkins, Minnesota. I drive cars for a dealership. It's not a bad gig. I retired a couple of years ago and had to get a part-time job before I died of boredom. There's only so much golf you can play before you want to take your .45 and blow your own brains out. I gotta say, I kind of enjoy it. I've always liked driving, and now I get to drive all sorts of vehicles all over the Midwest. Lots of pretty country out here. Plus, it gets me out of the house, which makes my wife happy. My granddaughter, Penny, thinks I have the coolest job in the world. She begs my daughter to let her come along sometimes. Usually, if I'm not leaving the state, I'll let her tag along. I buy her ice cream on the way, don't tell your mom, kiddo, and play some real music, you know, so she gets an education. I know it drives my daughter nuts, but she lets me get away with it. That's a privilege grandpas have. The last trip I took with my granddaughter was about 6 months ago, now. It was a short trip. I was driving up to northern Minnesota, to the Duluth area. It was only a few hours there and back. Plenty long enough for a 7-year-old girl, but not so long that she'd be fussy by the end of it. My daughter brought Penny over early in the morning and left me a laundry list of what not to do on our trip. Penny was already giggling when we got into the car. Now, you're not gonna tell your ma if I buy you McDonald's, are you? She shook her head, hiding her smile behind her hands. No, Grandpa. She was lying, of course. That was our game. I'd tell her not to snitch on me, and she'd promise. And then right when we got home, she'd run off to her ma and tell her everything. Then my daughter would pretend to be angry with me. But it was all an act. Just a little bit of family fun. Although my daughter does wish I'd stop letting Penny listen to Hell is for Children by Pat Benatar. So, Penny and I drove on up north, listening to music and chattering away. She does most of the chattering, I do most of the listening. She brought a few new Barbies, and she introduced them all to me in painstaking detail. She took pictures out the window with the disposable camera my daughter had given her. It was shaping up to be a perfectly pleasant day. The trip that day was a trade-in, so we were dropping off the car and picking up a different one to take back to the dealership. We made the trade around noon, stopped for lunch at a local diner, and started to make the trip back home. That's when it all went to shit. We were heading back on MN29 when we were directed off the highway by some local state troopers. I hadn't been expecting that because the drive up had been perfectly clear. Well, it turned out that there had been some kind of major accident on the road, and they'd shut down an entire section of the highway. Figures, I muttered, turning off of the exit ramp. Where are we going, Grandpa? Asked Penny. She had a worried look in her eyes as she stared up at me. Penny's a sweet kid, but she takes after her mother. She worries a lot over things that don't matter too much. Any change in the itinerary is bound to make her a little jumpy. I smiled back at her. Don't worry, sweetie, I said, reaching over and ruffling her short black hair with my fingers. We're just gonna take a shortcut. I know where we're going. Okay, she said, squirming a little in her seat. She tried to give me a smile, but it was painfully fake. But Mommy will be mad if we're late. What if I get in trouble? Don't worry about that, I said, taking out my phone. I'll call your ma and tell her you're staying the night with Grandma and me. Would you like that? That changed her frown right quick. Yay. Do you think Grandma will bake cookies with me? She asked, bouncing up and down in her seat. Can't imagine she'd miss that for the world. Now hang tight, let me just make a call quick. I dialed my daughter's number and hit send. I waited for the phone to ring on the other end. Surprisingly, I heard 3 short beeps and the line cut. No service. I glanced around. I'd taken us a ways from the highway onto some back roads. We were surrounded by trees, which was probably interfering with the signal. Well, that's all right. I'll call later. I could see Penny's smile faltering again, so I quickly added, let's play a game. You remember how to play I Spy? The next 20 minutes were pretty uneventful. Unfortunately, there's only so many times you can listen to a 7-year-old say, I spy something green. It's a tree, Grandpa, it's a tree. Before you get a bit impatient, that's funny. We ought to be out of these woods by now, I grumbled. If I was right, and I'm always right, the road I'd taken would bring us right around Perkins, Minnesota. The road would take us through the very west edge of the Winchester Woods for a few miles, then we'd be out in the open country again. But we'd been in these trees for far too long now. If I didn't know any better, I'd have thought that I had taken a wrong turn, but that was impossible. I knew I'd turned down the right road, and there hadn't been another possible turning point for miles. All right, time to pull out the old GPS, I sighed, pulling over to the side of the road. My wife had made me buy one just in case I got lost. I scoffed at that, but at the end of the day, it helped her worry less, so I put up with it. I never thought I'd actually have to use the damned thing. And I was never telling her about this, that was certain. I switched it on and scowled at it. I started to fumble with the buttons. How did I get to the map again? Did I have to hit home first? Or was it, Grandpa, do you want help? Asked Penny. I tried to refrain from glaring at her. No, I can do this myself. Wisely, Penny refrained from offering her help again. I was not about to be showed up by a 7-year-old. I had just figured out how to find the map when Penny spoke again. Grandpa. Just a moment, sweetie, I said, waiting for the map to load. But it wouldn't. I shook it in frustration. For some reason, it couldn't read our location. Grandpa, she said again, a small waver to her voice that made me look up. The road was covered in vines. They stretched across the asphalt, choking the road into submission. They looked thick and were an unnaturally bright shade of green. In all my years in Minnesota, I had never seen a plant that looked like that. What the? There hadn't been anything on the road before. I was sure of it. Was I getting senile already? Where did those come from? Whispered Penny. So it wasn't my imagination. I don't know, I said. Stay in the car. I unbuckled my seatbelt and opened the door. I felt Penny's little hands gripping my arm before I could get out of the car. Don't go, Grandpa, she said, her eyes glistening with terrified tears that were moments from flooding her cheeks. Don't go outside, don't leave me in here. I took a moment to hug her close to me. It's okay, Penny, everything is all right. I'm just going to see what's going on. I need to make sure it's safe to drive the car over those things. Once I know it's safe, I'll come back, and we'll go home, okay?" It took a while for her to calm down, but finally she did. She nodded into my chest and I pulled away, smiling at her. "Remember, don't get out of the car. I'll be right back." With that, I stepped out onto the road. I walked around to the front of the car and looked down at the vines. They were even bigger than they'd looked from the windshield. They were at least as thick as my forearm, some of them bigger. I knelt down to get a closer look. They had spikes growing out of them. Not thorns, but actual spikes like those on a cactus. As I stared, the vine in front of me shifted ever so slightly. I looked to the left and to the right. The vines disappeared into the forest. I couldn't see where they'd come from, which side of the road they started on, where they might end. Once again, the vine shifted. Was something pulling on it? Curious, without thinking, I reached out to touch it. Just then, I heard Penny scream. My head whipped up and back towards the car, which brought me face to face with a giant, looming vine. It was staring me down, like a snake. It even had a mouth. Or something like a mouth. Its center was gaping open and filled with spikes. On instinct, I froze. Perhaps if I didn't move, it wouldn't attack me. It swayed back and forth for a moment. Then, it began to pull itself inside out, like some kind of sentient prolapse. I could see that the plant's flesh was darker inside, and it had thin purple veins pulsing in its meat. It pulled itself out about 6 inches. It shuddered a little as it bottomed out, the more shrinking down to some sort of sphincter deep in its gullet. All was still for another moment. My eyes started for the car, calculating how quickly I'd have to move to get back inside in one piece. Too quick. My eyes shifted back to the vine. It struck. It dove towards me like a kamikaze pilot. I brought my arm up to shield my face. A searing flash of pain accompanied the vine sinking its spikes into my skin. I screamed in pain as it latched onto me as tight as it could. Then, it began reversing itself right side out, letting its skin inch forward, pulling the meat of my arm deeper into its gullet. It would rip out a chunk of my flesh at this rate. As it inched forward, pushing more spikes into my arm, my other hand reached into my back pocket. I always keep a knife with me, everywhere I go. Call me paranoid, but it comes in handy more often than not. It's also a good deterrent for wannabe thugs. I gripped the handle tight and brought the blade down on the vine. I used every bit of my strength, but it was still difficult to push the blade all the way through the vine. I finally managed it, and once I did, I began sawing back and forth, desperate to get the thing off my arm. With one more wrench, I decapitated the vine. Its body fell to the ground, followed a moment later by its front end, after it released me. My arm was black where it had been struck, and I was missing pieces of my flesh. I could see bone through my wounds. A horrible stench filled the air. I covered my mouth as I gagged. It was coming from the body of the thing I had just killed. The other vines around me began to stir. I watched as the previously endless vines detached into pieces, like unlocking their lips from a seamless kiss. The vines raised themselves up like cobras, and I knew that I was in deep shit. Just then, a terrible blaring noise blasted against my eardrums. Fuck. I shouted, clasping my hands to my ears. The blaring continued, and I realized that it was the car horn. The vines skittered back, obviously frightened by the noise, and I realized I had my chance. I lurched to my feet and stumbled back to the door. Penny was there in the front seat, her face streaked with tears but her eyes determined. She was pushing her little hand against the horn with all her strength. Even in the midst of my pain and horror, I was so damn proud of her. Just as smart as her mother. And I'll tell you plainly, they didn't get that from me. I yanked the door open and slipped inside, pushing Penny into the other seat. I slammed the door, hit the lock, and a moment later, we were tearing down the road. I knew that the spikes on the vines were tough, and it was possible that I'd end up puncturing a tire. But we couldn't just sit there and wait for whatever was out there to find its way inside the car, so I kept driving, honking the horn all the while. The vines in front of us mostly scurried out of our way, disappearing back into the woods. We drove for a few more minutes before we escaped the trees, the road spitting us back out into the sunshine. I was breathing hard. My arm was throbbing and I could see that it was starting to swell up. Penny was crying next to me, so hard that she almost couldn't breathe. As calmly as I could, I drove us to the nearest hospital, which, fortunately, was only a 10-minute drive from Birkins. I picked up my granddaughter and walked us both inside as calmly as I could. The nurse at the front desk practically fainted when she was my arm. By that time, the discoloration had spread nearly to my elbow, and I'd lost function and feeling in my left hand. Everything after that was chaos. A nurse took Penny aside and sat with her while I was rushed from room to room. I called my wife and my daughter and explained the situation as simply as I could. I was hurt, Penny was fine, we were in the Westchester Hospital, please come get us when convenient. I ended up having to have surgery that day. My arm was necrotic, and there was no saving it. I was just glad it was my left arm. It'd be no good trying to learn to write on my non-dominant hand. I was there a few days, of course. I was lucky that whatever infection I had didn't spread beyond my arm. I was finally cleared to go home. My wife, daughter, and granddaughter had all stayed in town to attend to me, even after I told them they could very well wait at home. Penny wouldn't let me out of her sight. She insisted on staying in the hospital with me to make sure I was okay. She didn't tell her mom or grandmother what had happened. She waited to see what I would say. Smart kid. I told them that I'd stopped the car to move a snake off the road and it had bitten me. They both scolded me for being an idiot. Penny didn't say anything at all. I knew nobody would believe me. Most of the time, it's better to tell the truth. But here's what most adults won't admit: sometimes, lying is just plain better. It's been 6 months since that incident, and life is pretty much back to normal. Penny comes over to see me more often now. It's like she's afraid that I'll disappear if she's away for too long. My wife fussed over me for the first few weeks, but she's gotten over it now. My daughter teases me about my missing arm, which helps make it feel more normal, somehow. But the other day, my daughter came to visit and I could tell that something was wrong. We started talking and I realized that she was fishing for something. So, Dad, she said, setting her coffee cup down, Birkins is having a craft fair. Since it's only a few hours away, I was thinking of driving up that way and taking Penny. What do you think? She could probably tell what I was going to say by the look on my face. Don't. You stay away from that place, Rebecca. I don't want you or Penny going up there. I should have known my story hadn't fooled her. I never could fool Rebecca, just like her mother, she's too smart for her own good. What happened out there, Dad? I just shook my head. I don't know. But listen to me, Bud, something is out in Birkins, Minnesota. And trust me, you don't want to be within spitting distance of it. Story 7, The Pleasant, Pennsylvania Child Kidnappings. I once read somewhere that it's better to be blissfully ignorant than painfully aware, but in my honest opinion, blissful ignorance can shove it. It's led to my job being 5 times harder over the years. And I'd really rather not have to deal with the blissfully ignorant masses who turn a blind eye when a woman is sexually harassed by her boss but won't complain for fear of being fired, or when a kid gets abused by his father who really doesn't understand how much stronger he is when he's smacking his son. Then there's the worst case scenarios, the murders, the rapes, the sexual abuse, the stuff that ruins people's lives but could have been prevented if someone just stopped ignoring what was right in front of them. Unfortunately, in my line of work, I deal with these latter scenarios a lot more than I do with the former. My name is Jason Walsh, and currently, I'm a private investigator based in New York City, so, unfortunately, I've seen some real shit that could have been avoided by a passerby stepping in, or a family member speaking up. In all my years, though, there's only been one case where it was an entire town that turned a blind eye, and back then, I wasn't in any position to really do anything more than just report what happened to the authorities. It was the case that made me go down the path to become an investigator, and it was the case that sent my life in a totally new direction. This happened a few years ago, in the summer of 2015, but even by then, this case had been ongoing for 5 years. Back then, I was just a journalist for a shitty magazine called Creep Factory. We were a magazine based solely on writing creepy stories, both fiction and non-fiction, reviewing scary movies/games/books/ etc., and otherwise just entertaining those who liked scary things like that. Basically, it was creepypasta.com in magazine form, and honestly, it was pretty shitty. I wrote stories on true American horror stories and American urban legends, but because I was the only one stupid enough to be willing to travel that worked at our small company, I ended up getting sent to the ass end of the country investigating stories that were probably made in the first place by a child's imagination or a person who just wanted to earn their 15 minutes of fame by telling it all tale. This was how I first heard about the town of Pleasant, Pennsylvania. Pleasant, Pennsylvania is a town in the central region of the state of, you guessed it, Pennsylvania, a little ways south of Harrisburg, the state capital, but a bit north of Gettysburg, the town in which the famous Civil War battle took place. If you need help visualizing it, look on a map. Pleasant is small enough you might not be able to find it, but you should at least be able to see those two areas and figure out where I mean. I'll go into the details of the town in another post since I can't feasibly write this whole story here today, but I will at least give you the details that led me to come to Pleasant, and the child disappearances that plagued the town for years. In 2010, Abigail Martin, aged 10, vanished on her way home from Sunday school on Sunday, June 21st. Then, exactly 6 months later, Ricky Martin, aged 11 and Abigail Martin's older brother, vanished after playing out in the snow on Monday, December 21st. This was the first year of the disappearances, but each year afterward had their own child disappearances, and each year showed a pattern. In 2011, Caitlin Glass, 11, vanished on June 21st, and Ben Folds, her best friend from school, also aged 11, vanished on December the 22nd. In 2012, it was Maddie Homer on June 20th and her younger brother Daniel Homer on December 21st. In 2013, next was Serena Dressmaker on June 20th and her friend John Vernon on December 20th. Then finally, in 2014, the year before I went to the town, Alexis Shannon went missing on June the 19th and her brother Nick Shannon went missing on December 19th. It's a lot of information, I know, but it's all important. There are multiple patterns that people failed to notice or chose to ignore, and because of the ignorance that was shown towards these disappearances, it went on for too many years before it came to an end. There are some patterns even you guys could easily have noticed. First, the fact that in June a girl disappeared and in December a boy disappeared. In each case there was always a connection between the two. In most cases, it was a brother and a sister, and in the other cases, it was two best friends. The second connection was their ages. I left out the last few ages to spare you all the unnecessary details, but each of the children who disappeared ranged in age from 10 years old to 13 years old. Each one was in their preteen to early teenage years, which not only made them weaker and easier to be taken by an adult, but it was also an age where they were old enough to be left outside on their own without their parents needing to watch them, but not quite old enough to not be susceptible to coercion, and especially if the kidnapper was someone they knew and trusted, they wouldn't think twice about the consequences of their mistake. The final connection was the days when they disappeared. To some of you out there, you might not be able to figure out the significance of the dates, since while a bunch of them happened on the 21st, there are multiple years that the vanishings happened on different dates than that. To clarify for those who don't understand what those days are, each of the first 3 years kidnappings happened on the summer and winter solstice, the 4th and 5th years happened 1 and 2 days before, but it's clear that the kidnappings revolved around the solstice. Now that those details are out in the open, it's time to move on to the disappearance of Casey Steinberg, the mayor's 12-year-old daughter. This disappearance was strange for a few different reasons. Firstly, Casey went to bed at 9 p.m. and by the time Mayor Steinberg had woken up and made breakfast, Casey had vanished into the night. This is odd because all of the kidnappings in the years before always happened in the middle of the day, and it was always when the children were away from home, This was the first time someone had vanished from inside their own home. Another reason this was odd was because of the fact that she disappeared on June the 10th, a whole 11 days before the solstice. If this was the same kidnapper as the years prior, it didn't make any sense why she vanished almost 2 weeks before the solstice. But that would all become clear in time. Now, these disappearances hadn't avoided my eyes before 2015, since my job was to write stories on things like this. I jumped right on it and came up with some bullshit theories that made no damned sense. In 2013, after first hearing about it, I wrote an article on how it could be cultists sacrificing virgins to appease the sun god they worshipped. Then in 2014, I followed up that article with a new theory that the local laboratory a mile or two out of town was using the kids in human testing and were going to make an army of mutants. God, looking back on it, I realize how much my articles were shit. Anyways, the last thing I need to show you before I can properly go into detail on what happened at Pleasant is the transcripts from the radio broadcast of 96.3 WZNC Radio, a radio station based right out of town that plays classic rock. 2 disc jockeys were in the station at the time, Raymond Wheeler and Brandon Peters, and their names will show up on the transcript along with the name Robert Moore, a local resident who called in, and finally a voice that was unrecognized at the time of the recording. The name for that voice shows up as. This transcript was from the radio broadcast on the night of June 15 at 10:34 p.m. Raymond Wheeler, host, looks like we've got another caller coming in. Ray answers phone call. Hello caller. You are on the air. What can we do for you tonight? Robert Moore, hey Ray. It's Robert Moore. How have you guys been doing? Brandon Peters, oh hey there Robert. Brandon here, I haven't seen you or your wife in a while. How you been? Robert, good. Good. We're just sitting at home playing some board games with the radio on, and Mary went into the bathroom. I was thinking, maybe I could request our song and when she'd come out of the bathroom we could dance a little. Just have a little fun. Ray, well, of course, we can do that for you, Robert. What song do you have in mind? Robert, well, back in '86 I took her out to a drive-in movie, and afterward, before I took her home, I brought her to the park, turned my radio on and we danced in the moonlight under the stars. We were dancing to Your Love by the Outfield. Could you guys play that for me? Brandon, of course we can Robert. Ray is queuing it up right now for you. It should be coming through your radio at any moment. Robert, thanks a lot guys. This is going to mean a lot to her. Ray, well, you heard Robert, ladies and gentlemen. Ray starts to play Your Love by the Outfield and talks over it. Up next we've got Your Love by the Outfield, and after that, stay tuned for more rock and roll classics coming your way. Ray mutes the microphone and raises the volume of the song. The rest of this transcript is taken from dialogue said off of the broadcast and through the radio's private phone line. Brandon, well isn't that nice? Good to know that Robert is still able to be a romantic. Ray, yeah, it goes to show that he still has all the luck with the ladies. You should learn a thing or two from him there. Brandon, okay, old geezer, I'm still in my 30s. I still have some time, but when are you gonna finally get married? You're in your 60s. Ray, early 60s. And besides, I already proposed to Lisa, the timing just. There's a noise from the phone line, a sudden labored breathing that surprises both Ray and Brandon. Ray doesn't finish his sentence while the two are confused for a moment. Brandon, I think Robert may have forgotten to press the end call button. Ray, hey there. Robert, I think you may have left the phone on. Don't want to kill your phone battery. There is no response from the other end, but the heavy breathing can still be heard. Brandon, I don't think he can hear you, maybe he. Brandon is cut off when the voice on the other end starts speaking. It is not Robert, this voice belongs to a young girl, the police estimate the age to be between 9 and 13. Hello? Brandon and Ray exchange glances. Ray mutes the microphone and asks, did the Moores have a daughter? But Brandon shakes his head to say no. He then brings the mic up and speaks to the caller. Brandon, oh. Hi there young lady, this is Brandon from 96.3 WZNC Radio. Are your parents on the line? No. Ray, no? Well, little miss, what can we do for you? Do you want to hear a song? There is a long pause with no sound from the other side. Ray, hello? Little girl, are you there? Is there a song you want to hear? Again there is a long pause, but just as Brandon is ready to end the call, the voice comes back. No. But, I'm in danger. Ray, danger? Honey, did you call the police? Where are you? No, I can't call the police. They'll take me. Brandon, take you? They'll take me. I can't go with them. Brandon, where are you? Are you safe? I can't tell you where I'm at. They'll find me here, they'll hurt me. Ray, who? The police? No. I don't know who they are. But if I tell you I'll become a monster, like what happened to Lexi. Brandon, Lexi? Who is that? Your friend? She was my friend, but... There's another long pause. Brandon and Ray don't react for a bit, but both jump when suddenly the voice comes back on. No. No. No? Screams are ear-piercing, and force Brandon and Ray to take off their headsets. No. I don't wanna go, I don't wanna be a monster. I don't wanna die. The line cuts, and Brandon tries to get the attention of the caller once more before giving up. Ray calls the police. That voice went unidentified for multiple more days until I arrived in town. On the other end of the line, as you may have guessed, was Casey Steinberg, who had been missing for 5 days at that point. She was suddenly on the phone with the DJs at WZNC without any explanation. At first, it seems odd, since the transcript proves that the Moores did not have a daughter, and in actuality, didn't have a child at all. Still, the fact remained that the voice that was heard was from the exact same phone line that Robert had used earlier to call in to request a song. The police arrived 10 minutes later to do a check on the Moores and to see what might have been the deal, but both Robert and Mary were perfectly fine and were still enjoying a board game when the police came to their door. They claimed to have known nothing about any girl in their home, and a quick search through the whole house turned up nothing for the police, and so the officer left the house. 10 hours later, Robert and Mary Moore were found murdered in their home. Mary was found in the pool with her throat slit, while Robert was tied to the bed upstairs and tortured before he was eventually murdered. There was still no sign of any girl in the home, but an unidentified set of fingerprints were found at various locations around the house, including on the upstairs landline telephone and on the board game that Robert and Mary had been playing the night before, and had still been left out on the coffee table. As well as that, there were the same fingerprints on the refrigerator door, the pantry, the downstairs guest bedroom, and multiple other locations in the house, all seeming to point to the owner having lived in the house. This set of fingerprints seemed to belong to Casey, given the evidence of the fingerprints on the telephone. But if the Moores had kidnapped Casey and her plea on the phone had been to ask for help, why then, did the fingerprints seem to show that she was casually playing a board game and just normally living in the house with them? Also, if the Moores had found Casey, and rescued her from her kidnapper, why hadn't they told anybody about it? There was one more, final issue, though. Where had she been staying? There were fingerprints on the bed in the downstairs guest room, but there was no other sign of her sleeping anywhere on that bed, the upstairs spare bedroom, or the master bedroom. None of the couches showed any sign of having been slept on. They weren't free of DNA that was unmatched, but none showed obvious signs of a person sleeping there. If Casey had been staying there, where had she slept? Where had she been when the police arrived that night when the Moores were still alive and acting completely normal? What really happened in the Moore household? These events, and more specifically the event at WZNC Radio, eventually led to me getting asked to write a story on the events going on. Not only did this draw me into the kidnappings, but it led to me discovering the truth of what really happened in the Moore household. The truth that then shook the town of Pleasant, Pennsylvania to its very foundations, and left a scar on the Pennsylvania countryside that still has yet to fully recover. Sure, ignorance may be bliss, but when that ignorance leads to the explosion of a laboratory, the scarring of a young child, and too many deaths than should have been allowed. I think ignorance should really go shove it. Story 8, my neighbor is trying to get my landlord to evict me, please help me. I thought I should post for some advice. There has been a few strange problems with my neighbors and it's starting to affect our relationship negatively. Firstly, I would like to say English isn't my first language, and for privacy reasons I won't be talking too much about where I live or what I do. Thank you for your understanding. In advance, I'm sorry for the length. I'm just trying to get everything in perspective. I moved in about 6 months ago to a small flat near the center of my hometown. I got a super cheap rate because the guy was moving countries but didn't want to sell his flat in case he wanted to move back at any point. It's on the top floor of an old apartment complex with no elevator, so I climb about 8 flights of stairs to get to my flat. The walls are super thin so you can hear everything that goes on around you, and it isn't well ventilated, so it has a tendency to get mold in the bathroom pretty easily. I have neighbors on both sides of me and one below. I've met the neighbor below and to the right, but the left neighbor doesn't seem to leave their apartment much. On moving day, my dad and older brother helped me with everything. It's a 1-bedroom with a kitchen attached to the living room and a shower toilet, so it's not huge, but it's enough for me, and I can have my cat, Belle, so I don't mind. It took all day thanks to the stairs, but by about dinner time everything was moved in. I went over to my neighbor's directly next to mine and introduced myself. My right neighbor Penelope is in her mid to late 60s and said she's retired. She lives with her 2 cats, and she said her son often comes to visit and not to mind if I hear a dog barking, as she often dog sits for him. No problem there, she seemed friendly enough. We chatted about me moving in and what I do, and then parted ways happily. I went to knock on the left neighbor's door, but there wasn't an answer, and I didn't want to keep knocking in case I disturbed a night worker. And that's how it started. Penelope seemed very warm and mother hen type. We would see each other in the hallway and smile. I saw other neighbors in passing who also smiled and waved. I think the neighbor to the left is a single mum with a child, but that's only from what I hear through the walls. The child cried day in, day out, and it drove me crazy. I often heard the mum yelling and screaming and assumed she was on the phone with someone. It was irritating as the walls were so thin. The screaming sounded like it was almost in my apartment, but I wanted to be considerate of the fact she's on her own and having a child can't be easy. I just learned to sleep with earplugs. However, I haven't seen them yet. The first major event happened about 3 months after I moved in, when at around 8 p.m. I heard a knock on my front door. I was worried opening it, as I had never had someone just show up at my apartment, and the late hour put me on edge, plus I don't have a peephole so can't see who it is. But when I did finally muster the courage, it turned out to be Penelope. She looked concerned. She asked how I was settling in, and I told her something like everything was fine, I'm just not used to living around people. She seemed to relax once I told her I was doing well. She said that if I have any problems that I'm always welcome, and that I'm a very brave young woman. That last bit struck me as odd, but I just thought she meant I was brave to live on my own. I brushed it off and thanked her and said she would also be welcome round at any time. She got a little uncomfortable and said she didn't want to intrude and went back to her own apartment. That night was also bad for my left neighbor. I kept hearing the baby crying, and then it would go silent for half an hour and then cry again so loud my earplugs did nothing. At around 2 in the morning, once the baby seemed to stop crying, the knocking started. It came in knocks of 3 times. Knock knock knock, then a pause, then knock knock knock, then another pause, and then knock knock knock. This went on for an hour, and by that point I was so tired and the knocking was so rhythmic I just fell asleep to it. The screaming and knocking started becoming a regular thing. I would go a few nights with normal yelling, and then the crying and knocking would happening. I consider recording it to complain to my landlord, but I thought maybe the baby had colic and the knocking was just the crib on the wall. All understandable, and I didn't want to be the bad person yelling at a single mum. After about 2 weeks of this, I had another knock on my door. This time it was right after I got home from work. I work shifts, so I'm not always around the usual hours, and this time it had been after a night shift, so I remember being super annoyed that someone knocked on my door around 9 a.m. It was Laura again, and this time she looked a little more annoyed. She apologized for intruding but stated that I needed to be more considerate of my neighbors. She said she can hear when I have people over and she doesn't think it's appropriate for me to be making noise all hours or the night when people were trying to sleep. I have to admit I had some friends over the previous weekend and they stayed the whole weekend. We had maybe listened to music a little too loud and talked into the early hours of the morning, but I didn't think we were that loud. She probably noticed how tired I looked and said that if I'm going to stay up all night there is no point keeping the whole building awake. I paused a minute trying to process what she had said, but before I could reply she looked behind me and make a little shocked gasp, then looked back at me. She made another quick quip about not having so many visitors and quickly shuffled back into her apartment. I stood in the doorway probably longer than I should have, trying to figure out the conversation. Maybe it was a mix of exhaustion and a fear of upsetting my neighbor further, but I thought it was just best to leave it and go to bed. When I turned around, Belle was in full Halloween cat pose and she was staring at me. I picked her up and smoothed out her fuzzy tail and took her to bed with me. I was too tired to overthink the whole situation and I had another shift that night. I continued wearing my earplugs at night and the screaming seemed to soften to angry talking. The only time I could hear it was when I forgot to put my earplugs in. Thoughts nights were the worst as the talking always started around midnight. It would go on for half an hour. We shared the wall of my bedroom and she seemed to lean right up against the wall angrily talking. There was a bit of paranoia that said she was talking to me, but she didn't know I was sleeping there, so why would she just be sitting in the corner of her room cussing me out? The next 2 months everything started breaking down. My other neighbors started being more distant. No more good mornings when I ran into them or waving at me when we would see each other at the store. I started trying to spend as little time in the apartment as possible, only going home to feed Belle and sleep. The whole place just feels hostile now. My ears hurt from wearing the earplugs all day and I feel guilty for leaving Belle all day in the apartment. I come home and she doesn't want to leave my side, always meowing. The final straw came this morning when I got an email from my landlord. I've translated and censored it not to give too much information away. Best dash. I would like to remind you that your tenant agree for apartment, from 5th of March 2018 5th of March 2019 is for only one resident. Paragraph 4 states visitors can stay no longer than 5 consecutive nights and approval for longer visits must be approved by myself a month in advance of the intended visit. Penelope has informed me of some other complaints that she has spoken to you face to face and states you have yet to comply with noise regulations and other neighbors have approached her about your behavior. Unfortunately, this means I am now forced to write you a formal warning. Please ensure you comply with all guidelines stated in your contract. Failure to do so will result in termination of your contract. Kind regards, landlord. So obviously Penelope has blowing everything out of proportion to my landlord and is now set on kicking me out. I'm already worried about being evicted and I'm not brave enough to go over and confront Penelope. I don't understand why she's targeting me when my other neighbor has been so noisy ever since I moved in. As well as this, I am heading to my GP tomorrow because I believe I am getting sick. Ever since I feel permanently exhausted, I'm covered in lots of little bruises all over my body and my colleagues say I'm pale. My mum passed of MDs, so I'm not taking any chances. I'm sorry for the rambling, but I really don't know where else to turn to and I don't want to burden my dad too much. Any advice would be welcome. Thank you for reading. Story 9, I'm pretty sure there's something horrible happening deep inside of the mountain. I haven't kept a diary or account of my life since I was a kid, but at this point I can't think of any better way to get all of this in writing. Please accept my apology if this sounds jumbled and way too stream of consciousness for its own good, but I'm having to get this all down quickly before anyone realizes I'm taking a little time away from my post. If anyone ever finds this and I'm not around to further explain myself, call me Jason. That isn't my real name. But I don't want this to get in the wrong hands and put my family in danger. I don't know if it would ever get that far or if I'm overreacting, but you can't be too careful. Keep in mind that I grew up in a small town in Arkansas that you've undoubtedly never heard of, and all I wanted to do from the time I was old enough to imagine such things was go to a good college in a big city and learn how to work with computers. I got in so much trouble as a kid because my mom would catch me in my room disassembling the house phone and putting it back together again by the time I was 8. I built a shitty computer out of parts that I got from Goodwill with money I saved mowing lawns for 3 summers in a row when I was 12. I loved and still love that stuff. We were poor, though. We were so poor that I soon realized that the only way I'd be able to live that dream would be to start my adult life in the military. So here I am. I'm 19 years old, and they shipped me off to middle of nowhere, Colorado to be an IT support specialist for the people way more important than I am who run this place. My older cousin who never got around to actually enlisting but loved to talk about being a commander in the Marines made fun of me for choosing the Air Force, Chair Force. Ha ha. It was funny the first 50 times you made the joke, but it was soon clear that it was perfect for me. And the mountains up here are really beautiful. I have a lot to say, so maybe I should get to the point. I get the feeling this will be the first of many entries if I don't get caught, and some would say this is treason, but fuck them. When you see something that isn't right, you do something about it. And this isn't right. The base where I work used to be a major hub for some really confidential stuff that had to do with the space program, but it's been an administrative, threat monitoring and training facility for years. The first couple of months I was here was a breeze because my job mainly consisted of removing viruses from PCs that were put there by over-the-hill officers who still don't understand that you don't open attachments sent to your Gmail from people you don't know and setting up new printers and monitors. Nothing seemed overly weird until I had to go down into one of the tunnels, we're deep inside of a mountain, one afternoon to get some supplies from a barely used storage room that I'd never been to. I had been told on one of my first days that there were spare network cables down there, so I grabbed a flashlight and my jacket and moseyed on down there for a little supply finding adventure. That's when I saw the doors. I don't know if it's even fair to call these things doors. They looked like the door of an old school bank vault if it was a bank vault for a troll from Harry Potter. There are massive blast doors at the entrance of the facility where I work, and these made those monsters look like the closet door in my old bedroom back home. What was even weirder was that 6 guys that weren't wearing the normal uniform, or any other normal uniform of any of the other branches, were guarding it. Luckily, I turned my flashlight off as soon as I saw the doors in the distance, and since I was pretty well hidden in the dark they never saw me. I stood there watching them for a few moments, and nearly jumped out of my skin when I saw the doors start to open up. The hydraulics required to open such a door were slow and loud as hell, so I stood there even longer waiting to see what was on the other side. I almost wish I hadn't stuck around. A guy who didn't appear to be much older than me slipped out of the first wide enough opening and made a run for it. He looked emaciated and terrified in his loose-fitting grey t-shirt and what looked like scrub pants like the ones nurses wear, but still weirdly strong as he ran between 2 of the guards and raced toward where I was hiding and watching. I expected the guards to run after him, but they didn't move a muscle. They didn't even acknowledge that he was there. I quickly realized why they disregarded this man who was obviously escaping from something. Once the doors opened a little wider, a thing flew out of the door that was unlike anything I'd ever seen. It was completely mechanical, no more than a couple of feet high and wide, and had a bright blue light on what appeared to be its head that clearly wasn't there for decoration. It glowed like some kind of futuristic power supply. Whatever it was, it reminded me of a big robotic bug. That light was the least of the man's worries who was getting way too close to me for my comfort. The thing, robot, android, had razor-sharp metal stinger like a yellow jacket wasp from hell, and as soon as it was on top of the man it ended his escape by running the stinger right through his heart. My hand was over my mouth before I had time to shout what the fuck. And I watched with wide eyes while the thing with the now lifeless body of the guy still attached to its stinger flew back inside of the small opening in the doors. They then closed with a racket, the guards continued to stand there on watch, and it was immediately as if nothing had ever happened. I backed out of there without being seen, said fuck it to getting my cables, and went back to my little cubicle upstairs. I didn't know what to think, and I sure as hell wasn't going to ask any questions yet. Story 10, my roommate has been replaced. I came home from work last Friday ready for a normal weekend. I texted my roommate on my way home that I would be late picking him up because of traffic, but he said he was already home. I pull up to the house and there's a car in my driveway I don't recognize. Probably a friend, I thought. I walk inside and he's in the kitchen, facing away from me. I ask whose car it is, and he says it's his. He just bought it. That's odd, I thought. He can't afford a car, but it's not my business to ask about his finances. But he sounded slightly different. He used vocabulary and slangs he doesn't normally use. He turns around to talk to me and that's when I notice that he looks different. He looks like himself, but I can't explain how. There was just something slightly off about his face. I tried to ignore it but it just didn't make sense. He kept asking stupid questions too, like where do we keep the cutting board again? We don't have a cutting board. Stuff like that, all night. I was worried, something's very different about him. The next day I had to see my doctor, and I mentioned to him I had a weird day, that it seems like my roommate might have been replaced. He asked what I meant. I said quite frankly, it's almost like a different person turned up in my house yesterday. My doctor's first fear was Capgras syndrome, a form of schizophrenia where you believe people close to you have been replaced by identical-looking imposters. He runs some tests on me and asks to come in again this weekend. I start freaking out. Maybe he's right, mental health issues run in my family. But what about the car, all the weird questions, the new way of speaking? Something's definitely not right here. I return home and find my roommate eating a kiwi from the fridge. Now I know something is definitely wrong. My roommate is deathly allergic to kiwis. I stop myself from saying anything, just trying to take in the whole situation. On a whim, I called his mum. I ask if she's heard from him recently and she says he didn't Skype her that weekend like he always does. I ask about his kiwi allergy, she confirms he's allergic. Then I ask about siblings. Does Alex have a brother? I ask no, just the younger sister. Did he ever have a brother? There's a long silence. He had a twin that we couldn't afford to take care of, James. He was adopted at birth. She replies, have you ever heard from him? He was given our contact info when he turned 16 in case he wanted to get in touch, but we never heard from him. Why are you asking? I hang up. I didn't know what to say. She tried calling me back. I declined the call. At this point, I don't know what else to do. I'm confident this isn't my roommate, but there's just no way to explain how he ended up here, how he knows enough about me and Alex's life, or where Alex even is. I'm afraid to go home. Story 11, Creepy Roommate. So, a while back I had a roommate. Let's call her Alexis. I was doing independent living after an awful family tragedy and ended up moving in with her. The first night was okay, we watched some scary movies and laughed over stupid memes, but soon things got weird. My mother gave me a charm bracelet before I left and I usually kept it on. Well, for school I had a swimming class and I took it off the morning of the class. I came home to find it missing off my nightstand. I looked under my bed to see if it fell, but it wasn't there. I looked all around the side of my room, in my pillowcase, in my book bag, under my covers, absolutely everywhere. Alexis was out at work and I called her during her break. I asked her straight up, do you know where my charm bracelet went? I have been wearing it recently and I took it off for swimming, and now it's missing. She seemed shocked and confused that it was missing, and replied that she didn't see it. I dropped it and thought I misplaced it. A few weeks later, I came home from school and noticed that my side of the room looked different. I knew how I kept things, I knew things were different. The window was open and I just thought the wind blew stuff around, as far-fetched as that seems. I brushed it off and just cleaned the space up. Alexis came home and we watched movies and YouTube videos all night, just being chill. I decided to get a camera because weird things were happening. I was in my last class and I decided to watch my camera to see if anything was going on. Alexis had stayed home sick that day, and I noticed when I turned on the camera that she was on my side of the room. I was confused at first, but then I noticed her taking my things, rearranging my stuff, and even smiling weirdly up at the camera, as if she knew I was watching. I decided not to go back there that night and stayed the night with my boyfriend. He had his own apartment about 10 minutes away from where I was living. I turned on the cameras with him and she was freaking out that I wasn't home, ripping up my side of the room, screaming. She started to call me, I didn't answer. She texted me probably 300 to 400 times that night, called me probably 100 times. I took off the next few weeks of school and packed my stuff. When she asked about the boxes, I just told her I was going home for the week and decided to pack things up so nothing goes missing. She took some offense to that, but brushed it off and left me to my business. I packed up my things and found my charm bracelet on my nightstand where I left it. I put it on not thinking about anything, and took my boxes to my boyfriend's because I was going to live with him for a while. I hated that I was relying on him, but I didn't mind it too much because we've been dating for the last 3 years. I left the camera behind to see how she reacts when she sees that I'm not coming back. She came home from work, normal time, I was on the camera. She looked around noticing the boxes were gone and threw the mattress on my side across the room in anger. She was flipping out that I was gone. She started twitching and frantically talking. I was scared. I turned off the camera and jolted away. I blocked her number and all of her social medias to keep her away. I was so scared I decided to change my number too. A few weeks later I had to take off my bracelet for another swimming class. This time, I noticed some new charms. Examining them closely, they looked like witchcraft symbols. I freaked out and threw it away. Scared she cursed me or something, I got myself a new one and made sure that one went out with the trash. I'm happy that Alexis is gone and I truly think she was possessed or something crazy. Honestly, I'm scared for her, but even more scared about the new roommate. And yes, she found the camera and disconnected it. Happily, I can't see what she is doing anymore. Story 12, somebody else was in the bedroom. I've spent the last 12 years, just trying to understand. I've interviewed several dozen eyewitnesses and friends of the family, burned through public records, the works. What I've finally come up with is my best understanding of what happened in those weeks in my town in summer 2006. I have changed some names out of respect for the parties involved, and reconstructed some dialogue. But the events as depicted are entirely in keeping with police and eyewitness records. Here's the breakdown as best as I can see it. Research Summary 1. 15-year-old Derek Snyder was his neighborhood's Encyclopedia Brown. He had an absurd knowledge of facts. It didn't matter what. People like to throw the term photographic memory around lightly, but I think it's safe to say that he had as close to an actual one as anyone. He could retain any amount of information thrown at him, and more importantly, he could access it within seconds. Like a supercomputer. He could answer questions you're on physics, or tell you the precise layout of words on any given page of Infinite Jest, or tell you who won the Oscar in any category in 1937. He buried himself in reading at all times. He would take books out to dinner and to baseball games. Just a voracious appetite to learn more. And with this knowledge came a certain skepticism towards all things unexplainable or supernatural. It's not surprising, given that some of his earliest reading material happened to be Encyclopedia Brown and the Scooby-Doo chapter books, that he set up his own questions answered stand. Every summer, he would set up a card table with a sign hung above it out in his driveway alongside his younger brother Henry, and his best friend Tyrell, like a lemonade stand. Neighborhood kids would come up to him and tell him about what they were afraid of. Monsters under the bed, ghosts haunting the basement, disappearing toys. The works. And always, Snyder would find a rational explanation. The legend spread throughout the community. And, largely because he only charged $2 a question, Snyder's table was always busy with kids. Snyder was awkward, sure. But he also was always eager to help. and more importantly, he was right so often that people sucked it up. I do think it was probably an ego trip for him. He was short and chubby and probably wanted everyone to know how smart he was. But he wasn't a jerk. He was honestly humble in his behavior. He just let his work speak for himself. His brother on the other hand was a charmer. Not nearly as interested in solving mysteries as his brother. Instead, at 12 years old, Henry was already practicing to be the slick salesman, trumpeting his brother's gifts to passerbys as if he were a carny, hawking a circus freak. He greased palms and negotiated tips. You could say he was Snyder's PR team. He loved his brother. On more than one occasion, Henry had stumbled home with a split lip, after laying someone out for making fun of his big brother. The two couldn't be more different, really. Henry spent the mornings training for football. But every afternoon, he spent with his brother. I think he just wanted someone to play with. And he was in awe of his big brother's brains. Which means that even if his brother had suggested something dangerous, he wouldn't have thought twice about getting on board. Finally, there was Tyrell. Tyrell loved his conspiracy theories, which Derek nearly always shot down. Tyrell was always trying to stump Derek, catch him on a fact he didn't know. For Derek, I think this was always about something to prove. For Tyrell, it was more about fun. He was, I guess, Derek's assistant. He kept track of every case, and recorded the preliminary interviews with every client, and kept track of all their money. His recordings proved crucial for both the police and my own research. While it was mainly kids who visited Derek's stand, we know that adults popped in from time to time. Mainly it was to have a laugh at the boy wonder, but additionally, there were always a few with genuine queries. An off-duty cop who turned out to be a friend of the family's and wanted to give a case an unbiased set of eyes. A loner who had heard one too many unidentifiable noises in his attic. They came once in a while and Derek could always set their minds at ease. So no one was all that shocked when Peter Nyes showed up with his two 9-year-olds in tow to ask questions. What was noteworthy was how Nyes and the boys looked. Haggard, with huge circles under their eyes. Tyrell detailed in his notes just how waxy their skin was. Especially odd for a southern summer. Thanks to Tyrell's recordings, we actually know how the old conversation progressed. Henry, afternoon. Who do we have here? Peter, so I'm looking at the world's greatest detective, huh? Henry, that would be Batman. My brother's a close number 2. What can we do for you? Peter, I came here for your brother. He do any talking for himself? A beat / Derek, I'm always happy to help, mister. Peter, Nyes. Peter Nyes. My boys got themselves into some trouble a few weeks back. They and their friends, well, they love exploring. So a month back, they and their friends all tell their parents they're sleeping over at each other's houses. And then instead, they dare my boys here to try to spend the night in the Palmer house. For background, the Palmer house was a staple of the community. It was built in the late 1800s, and hadn't been renovated in decades. The epitome of an eyesore. Its owner, Michael Palmer's will still stipulated that his fortune be directed to various local charities. So no one was inclined to challenge his wishes, which happened to include the fact that no one was to ever demolish or renovate his house. Instead, it just stood there gathering mold and cobwebs. And so of course, people came to avoid it. Where could you find better recipes for ghost stories than a decaying 4-story uninhabited mansion? Derek, we hear about the Palmer house all the time. Not a safe place. It's always creaking because the wood is rotting and shifting. Not a safe place at all. Peter C., my boys know that. And they went in there anyway. They didn't even last the night. Said somebody was in the room with them. They came screaming home. Derek, most likely a homeless person had set up in there, and they just startled him. Peter, see, that's what I told them. But they're convinced something followed them back. Timmy, why don't you tell them what you say you saw? Timothy, it was a shadow. Standing there in the corner of the room, watching us. Every time we closed our eyes, and reopened them it was just a little closer. And after we left, we both see it. Every night in our bedroom's room. watching us. It's a little closer each night. Peter, they're convinced some kind of spirit or something followed them back. Now, we've been to the shrink. I set up a camera in their room. We've done everything. And they still don't believe me. They tell me you're the only one they'll believe. Derek, I do have experience with this kind of situation. I've never once found an actual ghost. What did you see when you set up a camera? Peter, well, it's funny, actually. The camera died, it just shut off. Battery had been fully charged and it just shut off. Tried the same thing the next night. Derek, do you live alone? Is there another sibling who could be pulling a prank on them? Peter, it's just us, and we have the alarm system set up so no one could be sneaking in at night without waking us. Derek, what do you see at night? Timothy, it's big. As tall as my dad. I've never seen its face. But it's there. We're always too scared to turn on the lights. Derek, have you seen it anywhere else? Or just in your room and at the Palmer house? Alex, the other brother, it's anywhere we sleep. It starts by the door and gets closer every night. Peter, here's what I propose, boys. I pay you $30 up front. You spend the night in the room with my boys, bring your camera, and whatever gear you've got. Keep the lights on, and see if you can figure out what they think they're seeing. If you can prove what's going on, there's a much bigger reward on the other side. Derek, do either of the boys have a history of nightmares? Peter, not in years, they. Timothy, me and Alex both see it. Every night. It's not a nightmare. Derek, Henry, can you watch the boys? Mr. Nyes, I'd like to ask you some questions privately if you wouldn't mind. The recording didn't capture the questions asked to the side. We know that Derek agreed to Peter Nyes' request. We know that Peter and his two sons left shortly thereafter. We know that Derek received 4 more clients that day before closing up shop for the evening. Apparently nothing was unusual about any of them. They retired to Derek's house at approximately 5:30 p.m. The sun was still up. Derek's mom made all 3 boys tacos. She doesn't remember anything unusual about their behavior that afternoon. She was used to Derek's detective antics, and this was far from the first time he had slept at another home. She piled them, a camera, and an audio recorder into the back of her Honda Pilot and drove them over to the Nyes house at 9:15 p.m. EST. It was only a short drive. Peter Nyes stated that he put his boys to bed at 10:30 p.m. EST. He states that he watched Smokey and the Bandit and then immediately went to sleep. We have only the oral testimonies from Derek, Henry, and Tyrell for what happened next. Henry, we set up a camcorder facing the door. I had an audio recorder running at the same time. I wanted to bring my PSP to play while we waited, because I knew it was going to be a long night. Derek insisted that we couldn't have any light on, because if there was somebody sneaking into the bedroom, we didn't want them to notice anything out of the ordinary, no lights or anything. So we set up 3 chairs and just stared at the doorway. Derek had made us all drink coffee beforehand. He was drinking the stuff most nights anyway, so he could stay up reading, but I wasn't used to it. I had never had a drop, and I had the jitters. I know Alex and Timothy were asleep. One of them was snoring off and on throughout the night, even though he was young. Around 3 a.m., he stopped snoring, and I thought thank God, and didn't think much of it. Oh, and 2 a.m., we heard this loud crash from the downstairs living room. I looked at Derek, and he motioned for me to go check it out. I cracked the door open, and snuck downstairs. There was a broken vase, just laying in the living room. No dog or cat or anything running around there. I went back upstairs and sat back down. No alarm had gone off, and we saw Mr. Nyes put the alarm on himself. I thought it was gravity or something. You know, stuff just falls sometimes. I figured Derek would have a good explanation in the morning. That was the only time I ever left that room, except for at like 1:30 when I had to go pee, but that was like 2 minutes. Tyrell left once too to use the bathroom. He was gone maybe 5 minutes tops. Derek left once around 4:30. That's it. Otherwise we were in that room the whole time. And one of us was in that room at all times. We didn't see anything come in and out of the room. The camera was recording the whole night. You can see the doorway. You can hear it. There was nothing in the doorway. At one point, Tyrell though he heard something, and got me kind of scared, but we both paused and listened and we didn't hear anything. Tyrell, I told them someone was in the room with us. I could feel it, man. Like something was watching me. Honestly, I was too scared to turn around. But I heard like, a floor creak, and there's just this feeling you get. This wasn't just hindsight. Something was in there and it was not us. Derek, I spent that entire night focused on the doorway, and occasionally looking back at the two sleeping figures behind us. I heard nothing. I saw nothing. Just us. And then, Henry, the sun came up. Tyrell, and we saw it. Blood. Henry, everywhere. Somebody had painted the walls with zigzagging lines, shapes, smiles. The works. And the boys, well, I don't want to say it, they were butchered. The bodies of Timothy Nyes and Alex Nyes had their eyes removed. The eyes were never found. Their torsos had been sliced vertically completely down the middle from throat to genitals. And the walls were covered in blood. This was lengthy, ritualistic work. This was not the kind of thing that could have been done in a minute or so. Tyrell, Henry and I woke up Mr. Nyes. We were crying already. Derek told us to wait. He told us he was sure they were going to try and lay this at our feet. Honestly, I didn't even consider that. How could they? We were innocent. Why would we just suddenly murder and mutilate two little boys like that? Henry, when we brought Mr. Nyes in, he just started screaming. I have never heard screams like that. He dropped to his knees and then he just started hitting us, yelling, "What did you do?" I just didn't know how to respond. I kept saying, "We didn't do this." I think Tyrell was the one who actually called the police. He and I both thought, oh, we've got video. And we know we didn't do it. So why would anyone suspect us of murder? As far as Mr. Nyes and the first responders were concerned, this was cut and dry. The three boys figured the video would exonerate them. Except it didn't. The recording failed halfway through the night, and when it was recording, it was facing the doorway, which conveniently never had them in the frame. The audio didn't offer much help. No one could hear anything. So as the town came to see it, 3 amateur sleuths had apparently decided to carry out the most grotesque murder imaginable. Motive? Unknown. The town got all hung up on Satanism and violent video games, and the fact that maybe Derek was a little bit odd. He did like to read so much and wasn't the most socially gifted. Sociopathy, perhaps? The only factor in their favor? The window. The window was wide open because it was hot, and Peter liked to save by not using air conditioning. Alex and Timothy Nyes slept on the 2nd floor. But feasibly someone could have climbed the window and carried out the murders without anyone seeing. But to not make enough noise to get the attention of 3 young boys with good hearing, on the lookout for anything weird. So maybe Derek, Tyrell and Henry had fallen asleep. And someone came in through the window. Why not admit that they fell asleep? Or maybe, as Derek, who had never believed in anything supernatural in all 15 years of his life, who had a career disproving superstition, said, it was like it was a ghost. As my research has proved, and as you may remember from back then, this was just the beginning. If only we had known. If only they had known. That is what I'm dedicating these series of installments to, breaking down the event and the aftermath. Trying to understand what actually happened. Why? And how. All I really want is to understand. And after all these years, I'm still not sure I do. Hopefully, as you read this, maybe you can help me. More research to come in Research Summary 2. Story 13, in 2 days the world will end. I am so sorry, I didn't say goodbye. I have not slept since we left. I am already starting to feel the effects of having no sleep. I hope this message gets to you in time. You may hate me when you've finished reading. Or maybe you'll be grateful. Either way, at least you'll know, and that's all that matters now. Lux didn't agree. He said it would be better for everyone if they didn't know. There would be no feelings of impending doom. No fear, no tears or heart-wrenching goodbyes. Everyone would just go on like it was any other day. But that seems so unfair. Why do I deserve to live, when so many others won't? All my friends and family. My teachers. Even Rock. I've had him for as long as I can remember, yet we can't take him. Lux said he wouldn't likely live through the journey, shock of it all I suppose. But Rock, he's the best pet anyone can ask for, and I have to just leave him for death. It was so hard. Saying goodbye to everyone without really saying goodbye. They couldn't know, you see? I had to pretend all was normal. My parents. That was the worst, though they'll have each other. And you, of course. You have to know that I begged for you to be allowed to go. I begged. As I did for my parents and baby sister. But Lux said it was impossible. That just getting me on board would be difficult. He's had to sneak supplies on board for us, without raising any suspicion. So far he says we're all right. No one has asked any questions. They trust him. At first I refused. I had went 4 days after Lux told me that the world was ending, and he would take only me when he left it. I refused and spent 4 days getting used to the fact that I would die with everyone else. I was almost becoming okay. But Lux called me on the 5th day. He agreed to allowing my sister to come. He agreed because Reese is only just an infant. She won't take up much space. You see why I had to go now, don't you? When it was only my life, I could stay. But now that there is a way for Reese to live, the choice is no longer mine. I said yes. Lux was pleased. I understand this. He has loved me for a while now in secret, but it's always been obvious to me. He doesn't want to be alone on our new home. He doesn't want to make the journey alone either. It will take us 5 days to reach it. There are others going, of course. The higher-ups. But according to Lux, there's not many. And only a handful even know about what's happening. There's not enough ships. Lux was lucky. He helped build these ships, and test flew every one. He's an expert. He was ordered to fly alone to be able to carry equipment. But Lux assured me that even with the equipment, there's room for Reese and I. I'm worried about Reese. Scared she won't make it through the pressure of takeoff. But Lux has promised that this isn't a ship that I've seen before. It's unlike any that's been shown to the public. It's faster, and much smoother. He basically laughed at me when I mentioned my fears of takeoff. We are far more advanced than you realize, Sala. He said in between laughs. He was right. Takeoff was definitely easier than I thought. And the ship. Asa, if you could have seen it. It was unlike anything I've ever seen, even in my mind. But that isn't important. I wanted to tell you about the night I left. Our last meeting. I wanted so desperately to say goodbye, to tell you I loved you, that I always would. But I couldn't trust myself to say anything real. If I started I would have told you it all. And I couldn't leave you that way. I couldn't look into your eyes and tell you your life would be ending, and that I was leaving you too. When you took me to our spot, and we sat under the broiler tree and you put your head in my lap while you gazed at the sky. I nearly broke right then. But I had to be strong for Reese. If she was not mine to protect, I would have stayed with you. I'd have stayed in your arms under the broiler tree and watched as everything turned to fire around us. But she's my sister. I cannot leave her to take this journey without me. Asa. I love you. I know you will understand my decision, and know that a part of me will always be with you. We almost didn't make it. Lux had to sneak us on before anyone saw us, but Reese woke up just as we boarded the ship. My heart was in my throat. They would have killed us both if they found us, and likely Lux too. But thankfully there was just one ward on duty, and he was just as oblivious to our presence as he was with his own impending demise. Lux hid us in a very cramped place on the ship, where odd-looking machines were stored. Thankfully Reese didn't cry out again. She was content with my humming quietly in her ear, and the blinking of the machine's lights. Lux retrieved us after what felt like a long time. He was given the go-ahead. And it had to be exact. We strapped ourselves in, Reese in a special seat Lux had acquired. I was terrified. Our ship was scheduled last to take off. Each ship had to take off within just moments of one another. I suppose for safety. Only a handful of people knew about this, and mostly every one of them was going. There would be questions when 32 ships took off. We couldn't give them time to come to ask them, Lux told me. When the ship shot off into the sky, my breath was momentarily taken. This was temporary, thankfully. I looked back at Reese, but her cries were drowned out by the engines, though I could see her eyes squeezed shut tight, and her mouth open in a silent scream. It wasn't long before we were up, away from everything, bathed in darkness. Lux was concentrated on his controls, his eyes constantly moving from one button or panel to another. I asked him if I could check on Reese, but I don't think he heard me despite the engines returning to near silence. I risked it, unbuckled my seatbelt, and kissed Reese. She was still crying, but not badly. I gave her a little toy that played music and she was calm again. Lux finally was able to take a break, and we ate and fed Reese too. After we had to buckle up for hyperspeed. You will get accustomed to it, but at first it's safer to be buckled in, he said. It took quite a while for my legs to be able to move while the ship was going so fast. The stars were no more than a blur past the windows. It's been 3 days since we left. I was worried about sending this. For you may never get it. Lux said the connection is not strong, and the signal may misfire. If it does, who knows where it will go. Lux said there's a high chance in this message getting muddled with ones from our new planet. This scared me at first, but he told me my message would most likely be taken as a joke, or fictional story, so we are okay there. But I am hoping it gets to you before. I thought about not sending it. I didn't want to give you the knowledge of what was to come. But from what Lux says, it will all happen in the blink of an eye. I pray he's right. Our planet, is set to explode in 2 days. I had to say goodbye. I had to tell you I love you. I couldn't let you believe I would ever leave you, unless it was for Reese. We are close now. I can see our new home from my window. I've let Reese see as well now that hyperspeed is off. She smiled when I showed her. I smiled too, for the first time since I left you. It's not as beautiful as ours, but I guess I need word. Still, it looks calm. Unlike our world. Lux said there has been much research on this planet. It's hearty, has lasted a long time. I'm worried about the ones who live here. Aliens used to be just made-up stories. Soon we will be among them. Lux showed me pictures of them today. He didn't want to show me before we left. He was worried I would be afraid and change my mind. He put the book of pictures collected over a long span, research done in secret. I gasped when I looked at them. The first was a female, going by the description underneath her picture. She was dressed in a garment that flowed at her waist, but was tight everywhere else. She looked sleepy, side effect of the medicine she was given, Lux said. I flipped through the book, gazing at every picture. I was scared until I got to a picture of a baby just a bit older than Reese. It was a male, and like the others in the book, he was ugly, but also cute. He was sitting in a cage-type thing, and chewing on some round object that protruded from his mouth. I let Reese see the pictures. I had to get her used to seeing these beings. We couldn't show out fear. We would have to choose one of the beings from the book. Whichever one we chose, that would be the body we would be. I asked what would happen to the beings we chose. But Lux didn't answer, and I guess that's for the best. Lux chose a male, of course, tall and thick with odd markings on its arms and chest. I chose a female. The only one that I could look at without cringing. She's not as hard to look at. Though she was drugged during the picture, she still had a sort of smile on her face, though my main reason for choosing her was the fact that she had a child. A young female a little older than Reese. I needed for us to be together. Lux made sure to choose a make that was close in distance to me. We would be just to walk away from each other, he said. I suppose that's good. I'll need his help blending in. We will look like everyone else, and acquire their basic memories and knowledge of the world, but I would need to learn a lot of my new home. We will be landing soon. I hope we can keep Reese safe. Lux said that there aren't many that believe in life outside of their planet, so there shouldn't be any suspicion. I hope he's right. We are so close. I am looking at the planet now. It's smaller than I expected. I have to go now, Asa. I hope this finds you. I will think of you always. I will speak of you, Therese, and those we left behind. Our new home awaits. Lux has told me its name, Earth. Story 14, something tried to break into my home. It seems I have bad luck with the paranormal because of all the terrifying things I have experienced in my life. Most of the time it seems as if whatever is after doesn't want to actually kill me, just scare the living shit out of me and leave me with horrifying memories. They have succeeded too. I am terrified to go anywhere by myself when it's dark outside. You never know when something or someone is going to show up and try to make your night a living hell. This past Tuesday though was a little different, I guess. It was probably my most horrifying experience I've ever had. This is what happened. I'm going to use a different name, just be safe. Tuesday night wasn't any different than any other night. I was getting ready to take a nap before I went to work. I work third shift, so this was around 9 p.m. I had just gotten comfortable and felt my eyes getting heavy, so I attempted my nap. Knock knock knock. I jumped up as the knocking was pretty loud and it startled me. Who the fuck would be visiting at 9? I asked myself. I got up and as soon as I came out of my bedroom I felt a weird heavy feeling in the air. I've heard people saying they've felt this before when something supernatural was present, but at the time it didn't register in my head. I also felt terrified for reason. I stopped in my tracks and listened for a second, all the while this overwhelming sense of dread not going away. Knock knock knock. I jumped once again and this time a little yip escaped my throat. Whoever was at the door had to have heard me and they now knew I was home. Fuck. I whispered to myself angrily. I decided to grow a pair of balls and walk to the door and peep out of the peephole. I still walked quietly just for in case they didn't hear my girly squeal. I leaned down and looked through the peephole to see who was at the door. I got a little confused when I didn't see anyone at first. Then just as I was about to look away and go back to my room I seen movement. It was my mom. Only she was hiding around the corner of my porch and slowly peeked her head out and stared directly at me. What the fuck? I wasn't sure of what was going on. Why in the fuck would my mom be here at 9 o'clock hiding around the corner of my porch? The longer I stared I knew something was off. Her expression was completely emotionless. She looked like a zombie and just stared. Somehow she knew I was standing at the door but she wasn't moving. I decided to dial my mom's number and see what the fuck she was doing. This whole time that sense of fear and dread never left, so I was honestly too afraid to open the door and see what she was doing. The phone rang a few times before she answered and it only confused me more. When she answered, the mom outside of my house never moved to pick up the phone, yet here she was on the phone with me. "What is it, Kevin?" she asked, sounding sleepy. "Mom, what the hell is going on? How are you doing this?" I whispered frantically in the phone. "What? Doing what?" she asked, confused. "You're standing outside of my house peeking your head around the corner just staring at me." I think she could hear the fear in my voice. This whole time I was talking to my mom on the phone, the mom outside never moved a muscle. "Kevin, listen to me now, okay?" She got extremely serious and I could tell right away she wasn't joking. "Go in your room and lock your door. Get in the closet and barricade as best you can. Now go." She was shouting at this point. As soon as my mom said that, my mom outside just ran full blast and slammed into my front door. I jumped back just before she hit the door and took off like a bat out of hell and did what my mom told me to do. I got to my bedroom door and closed it, locking it behind me. I grabbed my chair and ran to my closet, jamming it under the door handle after I closed it. "Oh my god, Mom, what in the fuck is going on?" I still whispered so it didn't know where I was. "I don't have time to explain, Kevin, but I'm on my way. Stay as quiet as you can and don't come out until I call you and tell you everything is safe." She hung up and I was left in total silence. I sat with my heart pounding, listening for any sort of noise. Then I heard the last thing on earth that I wanted to hear. It sounded like my living room window shattering. My heart was pounding so loud I couldn't anything but it pounding. Kevin dear, where are you? This thing sounding like my mother, but its tone was way off. It sounded like it didn't know how to tone its sentences right. I could hear her feet shuffling through the house, getting closer and closer to my room until I heard the doorknob jiggle. Unlock the door please Kevin, she said flatly. I closed my eyes as hard as I could and stayed completely still. She started to turn the handle with more force, and after a few seconds I heard the door come off its hinges completely. I sat in terror as it slowly made its way through the room and to my closet. That door too began to jiggle. I quietly moved to the corner and covered myself with clothes and began to cry. I had never been so terrified in my life, and at this point I just knew my life was going to end. Kevin, I know you're in here, just open up. This time it sounded like its voice was a mixture of my mother's and some sort of demon or something. The door burst open loudly and I accepted my fate. I was going to die. Found you motherfucker. It shouted with a pure demonic voice. By the grace of God I heard someone else in the house shout from the living room. Police come out. A male voice shouted. I poked my head out from the clothes and this thing that looked my mother had a look of pure hatred on her voice. She was about a foot from my face and snarled at me. I'll be back, it growled and crept back out of the closet. As soon as it was gone I shouted for the police and they came rushing in. I told the police that someone broke in and said they were going to kill me. I didn't tell them it was my mother because, well, that could have ended very badly for my real mom. She was in the living room and I gave her a huge hug. After the police took my statement and did a good sweep of in and around my house they left. I asked my mother what the fuck that thing was and this is what she told me. It's a demonic entity known as Wurjik. It poses as a love to get to you easier, but at the same time it can't help but give off a feeling of dread to anyone that encounters him. If it does catch you it will torture you very slowly, making your last bit of life pure agonizing hell. I know of this thing because I encountered him almost 20 years ago. There is one way to get rid of him: you have to pass the fear and knowledge of him to someone else so they can think of him. If someone fears him he feeds off from that and starts his hunt over with a new individual. Is what she told me. So I'm very sorry, but this story is to save my life. I had to pass on the knowledge of this thing again, I'm very sorry. Story 15, Fun with Drugs and Black Magic. Chances are, you walk past something incredible every day and don't notice it. I'm not talking about the obvious beauty of nature, or the intricate plumbing beneath your feet that keeps your shit going in the right direction. I'm talking about things that go bump in the night, and during the day too. Things your parents and the TV told you were myth. But I can tell you with full confidence, most of them are real. In 2014 New Orleans was a city I reluctantly called home. I was an illegal jack of all trades at the time. I sold coke, weed, I arranged escorts of all sexes and sizes for tourists, I pickpocketed Texans who got too drunk during Mardi Gras, I did it all. I was lovingly referred to by one of my employers as a walking talking disease. I was quite flattered by this. If you move among the bottom feeders of NOLA, you might find an unusual amount of interest in the occult among your peers. I'm not just talking about voodoo, Wihadotto, Freemasons, Wicca, Satanism, Lavayan and others, you name it. From Chicken Man to Anne Rice, NOLA is full of more boo and woo than you can shake a ceremonial dagger at. At the time I thought it was great fun. If you study the thing you'll very quickly find out why so many three-letter agencies in the government are interested in black magic. For example, there is a powder you can blow in someone's face, and if done right, they will do whatever you tell them for a time and have no memory of it. Or kill them. Watch your dosage on the elderly. It was my interest in this sort of thing that led me to join what I will refer to as the Black Lodge. The Black Lodge does not actively recruit, and there are no grades or ranks. The idea is to push the limits of accepted knowledge about psychology and spirituality, and then record what happens. The problems didn't really start until we began to experiment with the Goetia and psychedelics. You see, many rituals are done with the intent of summoning some sort of entity and then asking it to do things for you. We couldn't scientifically prove the entities exist because we couldn't see them. But this was about to change. We were told by someone I won't identify that there is a tea one can drink that if made properly, will allow one to see spirits and entities. We brewed it, drank it, and began our summoning. We called forth Coronzone. Among all the thelemic entities we could have produced from the ether, this is the most dangerous. Especially to us, for reasons I will explain later. I could waste your time with the foreplay, but I won't. He showed up. Unlike last time we had attempted this, however, we could see him. And he could see us. To look at him was sickening. When you say demon, most people think of some cheeky little imp that looks like Mr. Tumnus from Narnia. Real demons are horrifying. We all saw him differently, I found out later. What I observed was a tall, lanky, disgusting humanoid full of spikes and open sores. Its head was cocked at an unnatural angle, and although the face wasn't what you would call a conventional eyes, nose and mouth, I could sense it looking at me with a gaze of pure disgust and malice. I felt shame, and ridicule, like I had been caught jacking off or I had a big nose in 1940s Germany. I quickly snapped out of my trance when I saw one member of the group get suddenly dragged away screaming into the darkness. He had been carelessly outside the circle. Even as we heard his pleas for help and his bones snapping and crunching, we dared not leave the circle until the banishing was complete. We later found him dead 20 feet away, bent into a disgusting pretzel of a human with his eyes gouged out. We didn't know it at the time, but there was no coming back from here. There has been a lot written about other dimensions, vibrating on another level. Once you have been on their plane, once you have seen an entity, you no longer need the drug, we found out. The fact is, you believe they exist without question once you've seen them, and that is why you will continue to see them. And you also don't need a ritual, the demons find you. It started innocently enough, but it soon got to levels that are reserved for gore porn and the grudge. I sometimes saw them on the bus, at the park, wearing people-like space suits and going about whatever task they deemed worth their everlasting time. But sometimes they just came around to freak us out. I woke up one night to see a 3-foot shadowy figure with red eyes staring at me through my cracked bedroom door. I banished it and went back to sleep, but I can see why normal people are terrified of them. We lost another guy when we experimented with actually using magic to murder somebody. Phil had just been fired from his job. Knowing him, he probably called someone the N-word and was set upon by HR, but we had rules against knowing things about each other's personal life. We summoned up a helper, as we called them, and asked that Phil's boss be run over by a semi-truck. Phil came to the bar to meet us one night completely elated. We had gotten our result. He showed us in the newspaper, his boss had indeed been pancaked by an 18-wheeler. But we weren't surprised when Phil's daughter found him dead 7 days later, completely crushed in his armchair with tire tracks over his whole body. I'm sure the cops had a fun time with that one. Nola PD homicide has probably had some strange customers over the years, so I bet it didn't come as a huge shock. I left the group about a month later after we had what I'm sure was one of the worst occult hiccups in history. The thing that makes magic so appealing to people: fulfillment of desire. Desire in this case was purely sexual. When you get 4 young men together in a city full of whores and abandoned buildings, the recipe for disaster can reach levels that rival the Colonel's herbs and spices. But this ain't your mamaw's dirty rice. This desire led us to a party in what probably used to be a hotel with 5 of the hottest, dirtiest sluts I could dig up around town for under $500 an hour. The night culminated in us taking some LSD, which, like good coke, was a rare treat in this part of the country. We stupidly decided to summon an entity we thought was the sex god Eros, and we asked it to wear one of the hookers and fuck us all. Best sex of my life hands down, although at the time my palms were sweating and I was oh so aware of the spiders crawling all over me as I was sucked into the night sky, which became a black hole. I actually ended up having a 3-week affair with the thing that was walking around in the 19-year-old stripper. But as I fucked it, it wanted more, and more, until I finally refused its advances. The girl stalked me to no end after this. I saw her everywhere, And one night as I was walking home from another drunken orgy I looked back to see her trailing me 10 feet behind. I could feel the anger, the indignation at my infidelity the thing felt. I walked faster. She walked faster. I ran, and she bolted towards me, a sick twisted grin adorning her tear-stained face. When she brought me to the ground and withdrew the kitchen knife from her dress, I thought of the irony there was in me dying no more than 3 feet from a dumpster. I desperately tried to banish the spirit as she brought the dagger down on me, but then I had a better idea as I caught her unnaturally strong blow by the wrist. I consecrated the kitchen knife verbally. I quickly pried it from her hands, stabbed her shoulder and said "Begone." The girl blinked with amnesia and slid off me, completely unaware of what she had been up to for 3 weeks. I made sure and tucked few hundreds into her bra for the trouble and got the fuck out of there. Since then I have moved and limit my sorcery to sigils and other more modern and safe things. I hope to join an organized lodge one day and really perfect the art, but I'm sure they don't want anything to do with people like me. Story 16, Someone broke into my house. I decided to post this here, because someone deserves to know. I'm probably going to go to jail once this gets around, but my conscience just won't let it go untold. To think that what I'm about to say started out as just a normal day. How could I have known everything would go to shit? I suppose I'm getting a little ahead of myself. My name is Amelia. I live with my fiancé, Derek, and he has been the biggest blessing in my life. His ability to work 3 jobs has been the reason we're able to live in a lovely 1-bedroom house in the woods by the lake. Well, lake is a bit of a stretch, it's more of a large pond, but I'll take what I can get. I'm so happy to have Derek, especially now, because I broke one of my legs in a car accident earlier in the year. Unfortunately for me, it was a compound fracture, clean through both the tibia and the fibula. I can get around all right on crutches, but not nearly fast enough to compete in my waitressing job. They ended up letting me go after 2 months of not working even though I told them I would be out for longer. Derek has been so understanding though. He's taken such good care of me, and insisted that I stay off of my leg as much as possible. He's gone into town for me even when I just wanted a Snickers or something else really trivial. The city is at least a 10-minute drive away too, so it's definitely not trivial for him. He also cleans around the house and makes sure the garden is perfect when he's home, because he knows I enjoy seeing the flowers. Anyways, I could gush about him all day if given the chance. I'll start my story at around 10 o'clock, just so you can have an idea of how this all started. Derek had asked off of work just so he could spend a night with me. We were watching my favorite movie, Good Will Hunting. Don't judge me, but something in me really enjoys an arrogant Matt Damon. Derek and I were snuggled up right as the movie was finishing and he kissed my head as he pulled himself away. I'm gonna get a glass of water. You want anything, hun? Oh no, I'm okay thank you. He got up and strode the kitchen, tousled brown hair catching the kitchen light as he flicked it on. As he rummaged around in the kitchen I turned the TV over to the local news. At least 3 people have gone missing in the past month. Police are urging citizens to contact the TIPS hotline with any information immediately. Man, I wonder if they are going to find those people, Derek said, plopping down onto the couch with an audible sigh. I sure hope so, I said. I can't imagine what those families are going through right now. Yeah, that's really gotta suck, he said, clearly disinterested in the conversation. I got to my feet, favoring my left leg even with the cast on, and announced that I was going to go to bed. Derek shot up from the couch, intent on helping me with my leg. You know, I can manage on my own, right? Somewhat hurt as his lack of faith in my resiliency. I'm sure you're a very tough girl, but I want to make sure that you rest that leg as much as you can, okay? I hate seeing you disabled like this. Okay, well you set the alarm and I'll be in bed waiting for you, okay? Okay babe, that sounds like a good idea. I'll see you in a little bit. He kissed me and we both went our separate ways. I walked through our living room, taking care to circumvent the ottoman that had tripped me last week. I turned the corner and hobbled down the long hallway to the bedroom, and a short time later, Derek joined me. He helped me change into my nightgown and we crawled into bed together and dozed off. Something woke me up later that night. I wasn't sure what it was, but my eyes shot open. I listened intently, but couldn't hear anything. I couldn't just brush it off though, and I shook Derek awake. "What is it, babe?" He mumbled sleepily. "I think I heard something." He paused, listening for a moment. "I don't hear anything." "You probably just had a bad dream, go back to sleep," he said, turning over to resume his slumber. Just then, I heard a very faint but audible thud come from somewhere inside the house. "Did you hear that?" I asked. Derek sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. "I sure did. Stay here. I'm going to check it out." He swung his legs out from the bed and stood silently. I knew it was probably a mouse rummaging through our trash, but I couldn't help but feel apprehensive about him going out there alone. "Please be careful, babe, okay?" I said. "Don't worry. I always am." He opened the door with only a slight creak of the hinges betraying his motion. I could hardly see him through the inky blackness, barely able to make out his shadowy form disappear through the doorway. I counted my breaths while waiting for him to come back. I couldn't hear anything. No footsteps, and no sound of Derek checking on anything. Then suddenly I heard Derek shout, "Hey! What are you doing in my house, asshole? You're gonna regret ever." His voice was abruptly cut off by a loud roar, followed by a loud crash. I covered my mouth with my hands, stifling a scream. I listened for Derek's voice, praying that he was all right. I need to hide. I rolled out of bed and hurried over to the closet, shutting myself inside. My breath came in ragged gasps as I tried not to think about my fiancé lying in a puddle of blood somewhere in our house, while a killer stalked the halls. I did my best to stay absolutely silent as I heard heavy footsteps come down the hall towards the bedroom. I shrank back into the closet as a hulking figure came into the room. The killer was extremely tall, their head almost touching the ceiling. They were also extremely bulky, seeming to barely fit through the door frame. The behemoth walked over to the bed and ripped the covers off. He growled when he discovered it was empty. He flipped the bed on its side and let out an inhuman roar. He slammed the dresser into the wall, cracking the drywall, and stomped out of the room. My heart was beating a million miles an hour in my chest, and I could feel the blood pulsing in my temples. I knew that if I could just hide long enough, that the police would arrive thanks to the silent alarm installed on the house. I just had to hold out. Damn us for moving so far away from the city. I heard heavy footsteps coming back down the hallway to my room. I held my breath, hoping to God they just wanted to lay down and sleep on a nice bed. The hulking figure strode back into the room and I could see its head turning from side to side. Its eyes locked onto the closet. It slowly strode over to the door. I wanted to bolt out of there, to maybe slip past it and get outside, but I was frozen in place with fear. I watched as the looming shape grew ever closer with every ground-shaking step, and I knew I had to do something or I would suffer the same fate as my fiancé, if not worse. I briefly wondered if I could fight it, but I doubted this thing would have any trouble killing me. It came to a stop outside of the closet door. I could barely breathe. Through the blackness, I could just make out a disfigured masculine face, devoid of any hair I could see, and appearing to have no lips or eyelids, with its teeth and eyes gleaming wetly in the still air. The man raised one meaty fist and punched the door to my left down with a single mighty blow. I screamed and ducked out of the closet, barely escaping the brute's swinging arm attempting to grab me. He bellowed behind me as I ran as fast as I could, the adrenaline pumping through my body, numbing any pain I might feel in my broken leg. Thank God I had the cast supporting my leg, or else I would have already been dead. I slammed the door behind me, hoping it would slow him down, and sprinted down the hall. I heard the door splinter and crash behind me as the rampaging man broke through it and tore after me. I rounded the corner in the living room and I saw Derek laying in the floor. Seeing my fiancée dead was more than I could take, and I started sobbing. "No, Derek, please, no. Please be with me. Please." I knelt next to him as I heard the thunderous footsteps approach the end of the hall. As I put my head closer to his, I heard him breathing. It was ragged and uneven, but he was still breathing. I pulled on his arm and pulled him to his feet. I looked behind me and the man had rounded the corner. While looking at him, I stumbled over a piece of furniture in the darkness. I fell hard and the man approached me. I turned to look at Derek, hoping that he made it out of the room at least, but I saw him standing over me. I heard the thunder behind me stop. Derek looked down at me. "Sorry, sweetie." The last thing I saw was his foot smashing into my face. I woke, bound to one of the kitchen chairs with belts around my arms and legs. I struggled violently, but to no avail. The belts were too tight for me to wiggle at all. I looked around and saw that I was in the middle of the living room. Derek walked in and flicked on the light, briefly blinding me. He was flanked by the massive man, who seemed to have calmed down. He grabbed a chair, flipped it around, and sat down. "Now," he said. "I'm sure you have a lot of questions." I couldn't speak. What was going on? This couldn't be the man that I had loved for 2 years. How could I have not seen this before? I stared wild-eyed at him, not being able to form any words. He gestured behind him. "I see you've met my friend. I call him Frank. I don't know what his actual name is. He doesn't seem to be able to talk very well. He is certainly good at following orders though. So long as you keep him fed, that is." "What? Fed? What the hell was that supposed to mean?" "I found him out on the streets. I think someone treated him very badly. Cut off his eyelids and his lips, you see. I treat him fairly though. He helps me, and I help him." I shuddered. I didn't think this was going to end well for me. "Is there anything you'd like to know first, my darling? Who are you?" "I'm Derek, of course." "I'm sure you mean, how could I do this?" "The answer is simple. You had a use, and your use has ended. You see, 3 jobs isn't really my style. Frank and I have been going around, snatching people in the middle of the night, and raiding their houses for goodies. That's how I was able to afford all of this, you see, while you did nothing but make a few measly dollars waitressing. Pathetic." He spat on the ground to punctuate his words. "I found the targets, got us inside, and I let Frank deal with his meal while I looted the place. It's a lot harder for anyone to report something stolen when they're out of the picture completely. I just had to deal with the remains, but I found out that they make great fertilizer." My eyes wandered to the window that overlooked the garden. I felt like I was going to be sick. "You were my alibi in case we were connected in any way. I even had Frank make it seem like he killed me so that in case you escaped somehow, you wouldn't connect me to this at all." "You're a monster," I whispered. "Those people missing. Those were because of you?" "Actually, yes," he said, with a very slight smirk on his face. He seemed too proud of that fact. "I'm a very careful man though, and no one suspected a thing. However, Frank and I are about to skip town. I made too many mistakes and there's too much heat here, and we definitely don't need you tagging along. You're an awesome fuck, but I'm afraid there's just too much liability in explaining why we need to move. So I figured I would give Frank one last meal, and then we'll hit the road. Maybe find some other rural area where they won't care too much if a few people end up missing. You'll never get away with this, you scumbag. The police are on their way right now." "Oh what, because of the alarm?" "Yeah, I never said that. And I made sure to keep the door unlocked for Frank. I was hoping you wouldn't wake up and this would be over quietly, but sadly, you had to go and ruin it. I must admit it feels good to tell this to someone though." My heart stopped, knowing that no help was coming. "How many have you killed?" I managed to choke out. "Me? Nobody. I just break in." Frank on the other hand. I'd say he's into the 20s now. 20? I thought. But there's only been 3 reported. I trailed off. "Like I said, Amelia, I'm very careful. I wouldn't pick targets that would draw any attention, see? Only people nobody would miss. And for the most part I was successful, but everyone makes mistakes. Now, I'm going to go clear out all of our valuables and make sure I have something to sell on the road, and Frank here is going to take care of you." After saying that, this stranger walked past me and out of my view. Frank took a few steps towards me and my pulse quickened once again. I could feel my palms starting to sweat and the panic set in. This is it, I thought. I'm going to be eaten alive. Frank took another step towards me and my survival instincts kicked in. No, I'm not going out like this. I can't. I then had a crazy idea. One that I would have never tried otherwise, but it didn't seem like I had much hope anyways. Frank took another step toward me and I spit in his face. It flew directly into his right eye and he roared. He flung my chair across the room with a single swipe of his meaty, oversized hand. It hit the wall, hard. I hit my head against the back of the chair, but through my daze I realized that the chair had broken apart from the blow. I got up and, while pulling the remains of the chair away from my arms and legs, ran into the kitchen. Frank's heavy footsteps chased after me. I opened one of the drawers and pulled out a long kitchen knife right as Frank caught up to me, grabbed me by my bad leg and swung me over his head and onto the hard kitchen tile. My vision almost faded to black, but I managed to hold onto the knife. He grabbed my limp body in his two powerful hands and raised my head to his mouth. I plunged the knife into his neck and he let me go as a piercing wail escaped him, quickly replaced by a gurgling sound as his throat filled with blood. I dropped to the floor, still dazed from being slammed on the ground, and I scrambled away as he started thrashing around. He threw a punch at me and I managed to duck under it. His fist slammed into the fridge, denting it as if struck by a meteor. Frank pulled the knife out and blood gushed onto the floor. His feet slipped in the liquid and his head hit the countertop, cracking the granite. I grabbed the knife and stood above him, ready to finish him off if he stood back up, but he was clearly dazed from hitting his head. He lay still on the floor, weakly attempting to breathe through the blood collecting in his throat. I lowered the knife, breathing a sigh of relief. I heard a yell from behind me and I tried to turn but was tackled from behind by Derek. The knife flew from my hand and we slid across the blood-slicked floor before crashing into the wall. I punched him in the arm but it didn't faze him at all. He had murderous fire in his eyes as he pinned my arms beneath his knees and pressed his hands against my throat. A wild glee danced across his face and he slowly choked the life out of me. I was able to turn my back slightly and loosen his hold on my right arm. I freed my arm and punched him in the face. He grabbed his face with his hands and I quickly pushed him off of me. I got to my feet as he rose across from me. I kicked at him with my cast and got him in the knee. Pain shot through my leg when contact was made, but I didn't care. He howled in pain as I heard something crack underneath my blow. I turned and saw the knife on the blood-soaked floor. I took a step towards it before Derek tackled me from behind once again, knocking the air out of me. I grasped for the knife, my fingers just grazing the edge. "You stupid fucking bitch. You'll die," he said, each word punctuated with a brutal strike to my exposed back. The pain caused me to scream, but I kept reaching for the knife. He grabbed my hair and slammed my face into the ground. I saw stars and blackness encroached on the edge of my vision. My nose cracked and blood poured down my face. He ground my face into the bloody ground and I gasped for breath, the coppery taste of blood filling my mouth. "You think you're so fucking clever, don't you? You don't know half of what I've done, you dirty whore. I gave you everything, and you're not going to take this all away from me. You hear me, bitch?" He growled in my ear, but I didn't pay attention to him. I felt my fingers gain grip on the knife. I curled my hand around the handle and with a defiant scream, plunged the knife behind me. I felt it sink into something soft and Derek shrieked in pain. He grabbed my hair and slammed my face into the floor again. I was on the verge of passing out, gasping for air, but I maintained a tight hold on the knife. I pulled and plunged again and again. And again. Derek fell off of me, groaning in pain. "I'm going to kill you. I swear to God I'm going to kill you," he protested weakly. I crawled my way over to the counter where the house phone was. I pulled myself up on the countertop and dialed 911. "Hello, 911, do you need police, fire, or EMS?" I gasped weakly. Police. And what's your address?" "1. Then I felt hands on my waist pulling me down. I screamed as I fell, my back on fire after hitting the floor, and then Derek was on top of me. He grabbed my head with both hands, picked it up and slammed it into the tile. Ringing filled my ears after the first slam. I still had the knife. He slammed my head again. My vision went black and then swam back into focus. I still had the knife. He raised my head again and with the last of my strength I plunged the knife into the side of Derek's head. His body went stiff and fell over onto the floor. I tried to focus on breathing, but my world faded into darkness. I awoke in a hospital bed sometime later, my entire body sore and my head aching terribly. A nurse came into the room. "Oh, you're awake. I'll go get the doctor." She hurriedly left the room and I was left alone with my pain and the soft beeping of the machines. A man in a white coat came in shortly after and gave me an extensive list of injuries. I had several fractures on the back of my skull, a fractured rib, 2 bruised vertebrae, and various bruises all over. I chuckled and said I was just glad to be alive. He smiled and said he would be too. He left the room and 2 men in black suits came in. They put a form in front of me and told me to sign. It said non-disclosure agreement at the top. What is this? I asked. It's saying that the FBI is telling you not to say anything about what happened in your house last week. Last week, I thought. Had I really been out for a week? Derek, I muttered weakly. Derek did this. That's not all that Derek did. The 2 men told me that Derek and X001 were linked to 22 different missing persons, judging by the remains found in the background. X001 makes me think that Frank was somehow connected to these guys. I guess a government experiment would explain his freakish nature. I don't know for sure though, and I don't think I would ever want to. Some things are better left unknown. I was released from the hospital the next day, after me insisting continuously. They made sure I didn't have any brain damage and told me that I needed to check back in at least every month. I agreed and they finally let me go. It's now been over a year since this happened. I'm fully healed now and back to my normal life. I moved out of that house and am now staying with my mom. She's fine with it, and actually prefers that I stay somewhere that she can keep an eye on me after what happened. I stay away from her garden in the backyard though. I'm still a waitress, and I'm also going to school for criminal justice. I want to make sure that I can help someone else if they ever get in a situation like mine again. I've tried dating, but Derek has definitely left a sour taste in my mouth. I guess I'm still not ready for that. Anyways, I'm putting this out here so those poor souls in my old garden have a proper story to go with them, and to warn the rest of you, that not sometimes, the worst monsters may already be in your home. Story 17, someone on Reddit is trying to kill me. I know it sounds crazy. But hear me out on this. I woke up last week, took a shower, got dressed, made a cup of coffee and sat down on my couch. It was my day off after 11 days of working straight, so I figured I deserved a lazy day. I binged on Netflix and YouTube for a while, and after getting bored of those 2 things, I decided to go onto Reddit. No Sleep is my favorite community, and I frequent it quite a bit. It's hard not to get entertained on a forum like this one, and I've grown attached. I was browsing through the posts, and clicked on my umpteenth one, the enticement too strong. Now, I'm sure you all know as well as I do that some posts on here have a slow start. Seemingly meaningless paragraphs that add up in the end, making me feel guilty for dismissing the post early on. Not this one. It had terrible grammar, a 5th grader's vocabulary at best, and it wasn't even scary. There were more things wrong with it than I care to explain. I looked on their profile and noticed they had been signed up for less than a day. It was their first story, and perhaps I was being a tad judgmental. But we here at No Sleep have rules for a reason. And I felt it was my civic duty to relay the rules in one of the worst ways possible. I didn't leave a mean comment. I didn't downvote it. I reported it. High and mighty me, I reported it. It was taken down within the hour, and a twinge of guilt hit me. I made myself feel better by thinking that by doing this, maybe they would try harder next time. It didn't make me feel much better, but it hid the disappointment I had for my actions. I wish I could take it back. But I can't. That was last Friday. The following Saturday, I received a message from an anonymous account on Reddit. Dear Celador Annan, I know it was you who reported my post and had it removed. I will give you 2 days to resolve this issue. Of course, I thought it was a joke. I had texted my chat about what I did, in hopes they could help me feel better. Obviously, they decided to make fun of me further and make the situation worse. I closed out the message and opened my group chat. Very funny, guys. You can cut it out now. What are you talking about? Yeah, what Dylan said. No one knows what you're talking about. They kept denying it for hours, and I didn't have the time nor patience to deal with them, so I let it go. 2 days had passed and I made no effort to repeal the report I made. Judging may be wrong, but the damage was done. My shift had ended in the early morning. I took the rest of the day to relax. Same routine as always: shower, get dressed, coffee, Netflix, YouTube and then Reddit. I opened the app and it went to the page where you can log in or sign up. That was weird, considering I never log out. I tried logging in, and it wouldn't let me. I tried changing my password, and it still wasn't working. I logged onto my second account to see if someone had hacked me, and there were a few pictures posted. The first few were extremely blurry, as if someone was running when they took the picture. I kept scrolling down and found a picture that was somewhat decent, and I clicked on it. It was a picture of a shed with graffiti on it, stating, "I warned you." The more I looked at the picture, the more familiar it seemed. Shock and terror took over, my entire body feeling like it was covered in ice. I didn't want to move, but I had to. After what seemed like an eternity, I got up and walked to my back door. On the way there I had turned on every light on the inside and outside of the house. I opened the door, and slowly stepped out back. There it was. Plain as day, sprayed onto my shed. My ear perked at the sound of something moving around in my backyard. I glanced behind me ever so slightly. In the corner of my fenced-in yard, was a black figure. The only thing I could make out in the dark were the bright yellow eyes. I squeaked in fear and ran back into my house, locking every single door and window in record time. I resorted to hiding in my clothes upstairs, phone in hand. I didn't know what to do or how to feel. I only knew that someone was watching me outside. A knocking came from downstairs. It was soft at first. It grew louder and louder, until it sounded like someone was throwing boulders at my door. I quivered and unlocked my phone, dialing 911. I heard the sirens coming, and I ran downstairs and outside. You shouldn't have done that. You have been warned for the last time. You have exactly 24 hours. A voice came from beside my house, rushing me and holding me up against my door. Its breath reeked, the stench of death and smoke. I cried and soiled myself, begging the thing to let me go and leave me alone. It snarled at me and ran away, letting me slump to the ground as I continued to cry. I told the police everything I could. They looked skeptical, and they made me consider that I was crazy. Especially when an officer came inside and told me there was in fact no graffiti on my shed. They told me to call if anything else happened, and then left. I went to my room after ensuring the house was secure, and tried to sleep. When the darkness wouldn't consume me, I decided to get up and go back downstairs. Coffee and Reddit. No shower or binge watching this time. I still couldn't get into my original account, so I settled on my second one. I tried searching for the account of the story that I reported, and nothing came up. I was confused as it had just existed less than a week ago. Why would he delete it? My phone vibrated and a text popped up. Less than 14 hours. Hurry up. I screamed and threw my phone against the wall. I couldn't do this. I packed a light bag and left my house. I decided to grab my laptop in case I needed to reach out. It's Friday now. It hasn't been able to find me since I left. I don't stay in one town for too long. I always wanted to travel, but definitely not under these circumstances. It still sends me messages, now to my email. I can't get rid of my laptop, because I need some way of contacting the outside world beyond hotels and my car. It has told me the horrible things it wants to do to me. stab my eyes out with a toothpick, cut open my stomach and rip my entrails out while I watch. Cut off all my limbs. I'm typing this out to ask for help. And, on chance that you see this, I'm sorry for reporting your post. It just didn't make any fucking sense and it wasn't even scary. You can't really want to kill me over that, can you? I left my goddamn home over a Reddit post. This is so fucking. Oh, another email with a picture attached. Fuck. It's me in my car. Story 18, The Nothing Man. I was sitting in the comfort of my own home when I noticed something in the rain. It was still, unmoving, which struck me as odd because there was what could only be described as a monsoon outside, something not totally unheard of in the middle of England. The fact that it did not move a muscle further highlighted it, despite it standing in the enveloping shadows of the night. I couldn't see much through the veil of black, but one thing I could make out was that it was fucking tall, at least 7 feet, if not more. I couldn't make out much more of its details, but I knew they were hideously unnatural. After all, this was not my first run-in with him. I was walking home from the local butcher's where I had obtained a job. I earned around £7.76 an hour, not bad pay, but certainly not enough for a good bed and warm food. The boss had decided he would be particularly harsh that day and left early, leaving me with all of his duties, allowing me to leave at about 10:30 p.m. My shift ended after I cleaned the shop and made sure that no equipment was left out, as thieves weren't uncommon for us. I was tired and just wanted to be home, so I quickly completed my tasks so I could be out of there as soon as possible. I ended each shift with turning off the lights, not individually but by turning off all power in the small establishment, which I knew would leave me in the pitch black. This wasn't a problem as I had done this a million times before, and I'm not like some of the other writers here where I feel anxious as soon as I can't see further than a few inches, at least not yet anyway. I flicked the switch and was somewhat relieved to hear the electrical hum, a signal to punctuate my exit, but this time felt off. Normally I would do this, head towards the street lamp outside and lock the door, relieved to be gone. But this time there was no light at all, not even the street lamp. This struck me as odd because this never happened, ever. The sudden darkness wasn't what unsettled me though, it was like something primal was suddenly turned on, an instinctual fear of something powerful, a force of nature. I pushed it to the back of my mind and attributed it to the stress of the job. This was a mistake. When I reached the street lamp, it turned on immediately, as did the others, revealing the empty street, made creepy by the vast stretch of small buildings that were dark and empty with no one in, like everyone was dead. The lights didn't come on at once, they came on in a wave, one by one until it reached the 6th light, which reluctantly flickered, painting the paved concrete a shade of illuminating copper, much to my relief. Or it would be if there wasn't someone there. This was odd for a start because everyone was always indoors before 7 o'clock, never after. I never learned the reason for this, but I soon would. The second weird thing was that he was very tall, unnaturally tall and thin. His legs were like long poles, his body about the length of a guitar, arms as long as his lanky legs, fingers outstretched to be the size and width of a pencil, with a head the size of a regular person's, except that it looked stretched and contorted, like someone had just pulled it. I tried to avert my gaze to my knife, which I always carried in case the local hooligans decided to be an ass and rob me. I had decided that I wouldn't go down without at least hurting him. If you're wondering why I assumed he wanted to kill me, to extinguish the flame in me like he presumably had to the lampposts, the answer is that I just knew. Something about him emanated just pure evil and malice. I knew he wanted to take me. Just like I knew he was staring right at me, his stare unwavering. My route home was the other direction, so at least I wasn't heading towards him. I had something going for me. It wasn't much though. Every time I turned to check if he was still there, a futile attempt at feeling secure, he would be one street lamp closer than before, 6, then 5, then 4 and so on. No matter how fast I walked, I could never gain any distance. My horror came when it reached the lamppost behind me. I looked over my shoulder to see that he was just meters away. The closeness just added to my apprehension because now I could see his smile, that elongated and distorted smile, how I wish I could forget it. It is burned into my brain like a brand, forever dooming me to a fate I do not wish to face just yet, but I know will come soon enough. The smile stretched from ear to ear. Between cracked and bloody lips were yellow and broken teeth, not sharp but certainly enough to chew through flesh. But the eyes were something else. They were hollow. Not dark, hollow, like nothing existed in that space, a vast nothingness beyond his decaying skin that filled me with such dread and anxiety that I almost pissed myself right there and then as I came to the realization that there is far more in our world than we can even comprehend, and I was just meters away from one such being. It is for this reason that I have taken to calling him the Nothing Man. He did have some decency because he was wearing an old and disheveled pinstripe suit that fit his long, slender frame. Its fingers were long and bony with worn joints that cracked as they shivered in the cold night. I felt a sharp pain in my body as it grabbed me. That was all I remembered from that night as I woke up in my own bed. According to my parents, I came in at around 11 p.m. looking as though I'd seen a ghost and just as cold as you might imagine one to be, both literally and figuratively, as I apparently just ignored them and went straight to my room. I don't remember any of this, but I assumed I must have been really tired and just imagined the whole ordeal. It made the most sense, or it would do if they hadn't mentioned that I had 2 long and dusty handprints on my shirt. As I look outside now, I see those long and spindly legs dangling over the window, swinging in the harsh wind, and I know that this is it. I finally understand why no one ever leaves the house after 7 o'clock, and I now understand why I had never heard of him. The Nothing Man leaves nothing. Story 19, Mr. Law, Queen of Dusk. I am hurtling down the street as streetlights pass overhead, creating a strobe effect. I shift the Ferrari into high gear. Lily growls and goes faster. Lily, the woman I loved. We met when she was an escort and I was undercover working on the Cortez case. Her testimony and evidence brought down the cartel, and months later she was dead. I call my car Lily because, like her namesake, she will deliver me out of the darkness and into the light. My hands tighten around the wheel as we rocket down the road. Cortez has escaped custody. Word on the street is he is heading towards the docks and leaving the country via container ship. I have other plans. The stereo is blaring machine-made future-sounding music. A future Lily will never have, thanks to Cortez. My linen suit is soaked from the heat and humidity of the Florida night. My irritation isn't helped by the cocaine. I sniff and feel the drip work its way down my throat. I developed the habit while I was undercover. Lily had a habit too. We were going to go to the Caribbean and kick our habits and live in peace. Now we will never have the chance. The one thing that remains the same is the fact after tonight I will have to leave the country. The cartel will look for me, and 2 hours ago I threw my badge at my sergeant. After tonight the police will be looking for me too. I remember the day I graduated from the academy. Never in a million years could I imagine I would end up here. A cop turned executioner. Life is funny like that. Lily was funny too. Her smile and jokes were the single ray of light in a world of shit and darkness. I can't help but think about what they will say. They will talk about a highly decorated detective turned criminal to exact revenge. To be honest, there is a real chance I will die tonight. I don't care either way. Just as long as Cortez doesn't live. I look at my watch. Just 30 minutes separate me from the man I am going to kill. There will be far more bloodshed, of course. Many will die trying to fill the vacuum left behind by Cortez's death. I don't care about that either. It's all details to me. I look at my speedometer. I'm not going fast enough. I press down on the accelerator and Lily climbs well over 100. This won't be easy. There will be men around the dock and on the deck. No doubt Cortez has warned them and they will be on the lookout for me. I pull onto the off-ramp and Lily slides around the curve. I don't worry, I know what Lily is capable of and how far I can push her. I blow through the stoplight and onto the empty street. Lily's exhaust echoes off the skyscrapers as she picks up speed. In the distance I can hear police sirens. They are looking for me. No matter. I didn't give them all the information I had. They are looking for me citywide while I'm going to a specific place. The docks are just up ahead. I gun it and Lily slams into the gates and sends them flying. I downshift and slide around the corner. Cortez's ship is at the end of the docks in Slip 11. I will stop just outside of Slip 11 and sneak my way in. I get to Dock 10 and slide to a stop. I still have almost a gram left, so I sort it. My nerves light up in electricity as I grab the duffel bag in the passenger seat. During my investigation I meet a Vietnam vet who now runs guns. Whatever you want he has. I sling the bag over my shoulder as I light a cigarette to calm my coke-infused nerves. I walk down the dock wet form the daily rainburst. As I near Dock 11 I start walking among the large wooden crates to conceal my approach. I get to a good spot and survey the scene. Cortez hasn't shown up yet, but some of his goons have. I see them walking, doing a final sweep before Cortez arrives. I lay down the duffel bag and open it. I pull out some landmines, the kind that struck fear into the men that fought the Viet Cong. One side of the mine has the simple instructions of forward towards enemy. Good advice. I hide the trip mines among the crates, linking them together by tripwire. I check my guns to make sure they are fully loaded. As I do my final check, a car pulls up. I look up to see a limo slows to a stop and a man with several women get out. It's Cortez. He is unmistakable with his white linen suit and red silk shirt. This asshole can't even keep a low profile for 5 minutes. He walks up the gangplank and onto the deck. Let's get this over with. I am so tired. I haven't slept in 3 days. Soon it won't matter, however this goes down I will get my rest soon. I pull out an AK and fire. Several bullets hit the limo and make it explode. Cortez and his ladies run across the dock. When he is clear, his men run down the gangplank firing their own automatic weapons. I fire into the air so they know where I'm at. I grab the duffel and run. I wonder if I ran far enough when I feel heat on my back and the sound of several explosions going off deafens me a little. The guards weren't expecting my trap. The mines, along with the crates and whatever is inside of them, created shrapnel that created a wall of death. I turn and walk back. I've killed more guards than I thought I would. The path to Cortez is mostly clear now. I walk past the fire and rubble and over the shredded, bloody bodies on the ground. Someone tries to raise the gangplank, so I aim the AK and fire. Their body falls and splashes in the water. As I near the boat, I pick off 2 more guards. One guard tries to flank me, but I take him out. I make my way down the boat. I am too close to make a mistake now. I get close to a cargo hold, a bright light shines down on it and Cortez's voice comes over the loudspeaker. Is that Detective Faust? Now, detective. I didn't give permission to board my vessel. I'm bad at asking permission. Cortez laughs. Why are you here, detective? Is it because of that whore? That was just business, nothing personal. I couldn't allow her to testify. You want a new whore to replace the one you lost? Have several. One of the cargo doors opens and several fingers dart out. I can hear women screaming. I'll make you a deal. Let me go and you can have all of them. Several to replace one? Sounds like a good deal to me. I pull out my last surprise out of the duffel. I pull the pin and throw it into the cargo hold. There is a small explosion and blood mist flies into the air. There will be no negotiations. I yell. Fuck them. If they hang with Cortez, they weren't innocent or deserving of me questioning my morals. I suppose I should offer you a job. That was breathtaking ruthlessness. Your whore must have given a hell of a blow job. I scream and fire at the lights. I hit them and they go out in a shower of sparks. Very well. I see you are committed to this path. Come and get me. I run towards the cabin. Staying in cover and down. I run up the steps and stop. Cortez is in there and has the advantage. The cabin has 3 doors. 2 on the side and 1 leading into the boat. I put my hand on the handle and take a deep breath. I pull the handle and swing the door open. I fire my AK until it clicks. That moment I am hit in the shoulder. I spin around and fall down the steel steps. I lay on the deck dazed, blood streaming from my shoulder and head. I have a crushed skull, no doubt. I crawl to some nearby crates. If it wasn't for the coke I would be screaming now. Detective? Cortez coos as he exits the cabin. He finds my empty ac. This is a lot of blood. Are you alright? Come out and I will send for help, he says sarcastically. I watch him walk down the stairs. I use the crates to brace me as I stand. I pull out my handgun and fire. I hit Cortez 3 times. One in the shoulder, one in the leg and one in the back. Pretty good considering I can barely focus. I walk out from the crates and towards Cortez as he crawls to the wall and sits against it. Blood seeps from his mouth as he laughs. I suppose it was always going to come to this. Yeah. I answer. If I would have known one dead whore would have caused all this chaos, I would have never killed her. Hindsight and all that, I say, lowering my gun and aiming it at his head. Cortez holds out his gun and aims it at my head. Now what, detective? I guess it's a race to hell now. We go at bang. We pull the triggers. I scream as I fall to the floor. The glow of the TV is the only light in the room. I am in Jason's house. We had an 80s movie marathon tonight. Jason, asleep on the couch across from me, wakes with a start. What the shit? It's me. Had a bad dream. Why you on the floor? Fell off, Sherlock. At least you didn't wake anyone else. I look and see Gumdrop and Snowflake sleeping on the third couch and snoring without a care in the world. Jason rubs his eyes. So what was your dream about? I was an 80s cop seeking revenge for my dead hooker girlfriend. Did you drive a Lamborghini? No. A Ferrari? Lame. Lambos are cooler. Don't think so. Glad we didn't watch any 70s cannibal exploitation movies tonight. That's actually a good point. I could have been gnawing your face. I'm pretty sure that would have woken me up. Doubt it. Okay, enough of this. Let's get you home before you wake up my roommate. Jason says, standing. I'm sure I can make it the few steps from here to my house. You can't even take a walk in the park without causing trouble. God damn it. He found out about the park. Shut up. We walk outside. I stop and stretch. Maverick swoops down and lands in front of us. What's up, dude? Jason asks. 4 large gargoyles land in front of us. I look up and see the roofline was empty. Jason turns to me. See? I scowl at him and turn my attention to the gargoyles. Why have you woken up now? The gargoyles just look at us for a moment. It is taking some adjustment to their new look. Instead of stone, their skin was smooth and grey. Their eyes were completely black and horns curved down and back on the side of their head. Maverick flies up in the air and hovers in the face of the biggest gargoyle. He speaks harshly in his wind language. I can't tell what he is saying, but he isn't happy. The gargoyle swats at him but misses wildly. Maverick is just way too fast for him. Maverick swings back to attack, but I grab him. Easy. Let's see what they want before we brawl. Maverick answers. He is displeased. Why are you here? I ask. The large gargoyle answers. To prepare. For what? Her arrival. Who is her and why is she coming? The Queen is coming to talk to you and him specifically. He says, pointing at Jason. I look at Jason, who is all smiling and smug like Yashi does. I'm charming as fuck. Just like that, Jason has gotten under my skin and irritated me. Okay, Romeo. When she tries to take your head or whatever, don't look to me for help. Jason closes his eyes and holds up a hand. I'll be fine. I turn to the lead gargoyle. When they were on the roof, perception was off. Now that they are in front of me, they are huge. The leader even more so. He is massive. When will she get here? Soon. You will stay until she gets here. I whisper in Maverick's ear. Go look around. Tell me what you see. Maverick takes off. Where is the creature going? The lead gargoyle asks. I don't know. I'm not his mother. That one is a wild card. Follow him. The lead gargoyle says to the one on the far left. He takes off after Maverick. I hope Maverick will be okay. Where are you from? We are instructed to tell you what you need to know. Nothing more. Well, shit. The gargoyle that left comes back. I lost him. He is quicker than the wind. I can't help but smile. Maybe there is a reason for the gremlin's cockiness. Doesn't matter. She is close. Maverick dive bombs, flips and lands in front of us, already talking. Jason looks at me. We are about to get a lot of company. No sooner than he says that hundreds and hundreds of gargoyles land in the yard all around us. This could be very bad. A shadow passes overhead. I look up to see two figures flying above us. One large figure and one small one. The second, the larger one, lands, all of the gargoyles kneel. The larger gargoyle is clearly feminine, where the rest are built like tanks. She isn't curvy for sure, but not like the rest. The other difference is her long black hair that is swept back in between her horns and on her back. She walks like a runway model as she approaches. Please stand. She tells the other gargoyles in a slight French accent. Salutations. I am the queen of all gargoyles. The queen of dusk. You however can call me Josephine. Fine, Josephine. I do not mean to be rude, but why are you here at my home? The queen smiles to say thank you. Especially you, she says, walking to Jason. The smaller gargoyle hops up into her arms. I believe you have already met my son Thibaut, the crown prince. It takes a moment, but Jason's eyes widens and he breaks out into a smile. Oh yeah. I remember you. What's up, dude? Jason holds out a fist. Thibaut hits it and giggles. I still don't know what's going on, Jason. You remember when we were looking for birdhouses and that little gargoyle got knocked over and I grabbed it? This is him. Jason excluded the fact I knock over the prince. My irritation is back down to 0. You're right. Yes. My son is quite curious. He is under guard at all times. We still don't know how he escaped. Thankfully Jason kept him from harm. When we are stone, we can break like any other rock. We are indebted to you. Thibaut squirms and reaches over to Jason. Seems my son would like to thank you as well. Get over here, Pebble. The queen hands him over. The prince shrieks as Jason tickles his stomach. Your Majesty. One of her guards says he saved my son's life. I highly doubt he would bring harm to him now. The queen walks to me and looks at me with her jet black eyes. Perhaps we can talk? Sure. Follow me. The queen and I walk. Two gargoyle guards follow, but at a distance to give us privacy. I wish to convey the gratefulness my husband and I have for you too. To be fair, Jason did most of the work. Still, it is customary for one ruler to personally thank another in cases like this. I'm sorry the king couldn't make it. Well. Look who has moved up in the world. From clan leader to queen. Please tell your husband I have taken no offense. I will. He will be pleased you haven't taken any. Good. If you don't mind, I have a few questions for you. Please ask. How do you know Jason caught the prince? A mother knows. In his own way he told me. I was able to see the moment. The bond between gargoyles is strong and hard to describe. I see. I noticed you have a French accent. The queen laughs lightly, but the 4 I sent here doesn't. Yeah. Our kingdom is worldwide. We have ruled for almost a millennia from France. I merely sent some subjects from here in America. That makes sense. The queen stops walking. Faust. There is another reason I have come. This doesn't sound good. What other reason could you be here? The queen thinks for a moment. We gargoyles are attuned to the energy of nature. There are some disturbances. Like what? A dark energy is gathering in this region. As a matter of fact, both my husband and I are worried that something bad is coming. How bad? I really don't want to know this answer. If the badness persists, it could do massive damage. To what? Everything. I exhale. I was right. I really didn't want to know the answer. My husband and I wish to leave some guards here. What happens here could affect us. Leaving guards here will help you and give us a warning. Given enough time, my husband can send our army. That should be fine, thank you. The 4 you sent here were no trouble at all. If it's fine with you, I would like them to stay. Very well. I'm glad you believed me and my warning. I've seen enough strange shit not to believe you. I'm sure. If you don't mind, what happened here with you and Alexia? You know about her? Yes. She was a hateful creature. Many of us believed humans were just the first step in her plan for global dominance. Alexia believed only fairies should walk on Earth. I'm conflicted about killing her. The Queen puts a hand on my shoulder. No. You did the right thing. She was inspiring other fairies to rise. Her words were cancer and it was spreading fast. Your killing her will stop the madness and hopefully none of them will pick up where she left off. Okay, that helps, I think. So you want to know what really happened? I do. Well, I was at the lake. Here I will show you. We walk to the lake as I tell my story. It was nice talking to the Queen. She was graceful and warm. Later we walk back to the guest house. Jason is sitting on a chair rubbing the back of Thebo. The crown prince has fallen asleep on his shoulder. The prince has worn himself out. Jason says as he hands him over to the Queen, he tends to do that. Thank you. If there is anything you need, just ask. I appreciate that, Your Majesty. The Queen turns to the head of her honor guard. Where is the 4 I sent here? The 4 gargoyles step forward from the crowd and kneel in front of her. We are here, our Queen. The biggest one says, you have done the kingdom a great service here. I've been told you conducted yourselves like true representatives of the crown should. Do you wish to continue your service here? It would be our honor, Your Majesty. The Queen touches the shoulder and head of each of the 4 gargoyles. Then you should have a rank that reflects this service and excellence you have already shown. Rise, Knights of the Dark. The rest of the gargoyles celebrate as the 4 stand. Thank you, Your Majesty. Guard this home and everything in it. They are friends of the kingdom and should be guarded as such, even if that means your life. Understood? Yes, my Queen. They all say in unison, very good. Thank you, knights. The Queen turns to me and Jason. The prince cradled in one of her arms. Thank you for your hospitality. We must go now. It will be days before we are home. Feel free to come back anytime. I say, bring the little guy. Jason adds, I will. Perhaps my husband will come as well. Knowing him, he will want to thank you personally. Goodbye. Goodbye. Later. The rest of the gargoyles take to the air as well. I watch as they leave, lead by the Queen. What do we call you, dudes? Jason asks. The leader, the massive one, steps forward. Our true language is hard for your kind to speak. You may call me Mountain. The second gargoyle comes forward. Slate. The third tips his head up. Granite. The fourth takes his turn. Vlad. Ha. I get it. Jason laughs. What? I ask. Jason smiles and points at Vlad. Creature of the night. Wings of a bat. That is funny. Very clever. Vlad smiles and Mountain speaks. Where would you like us? The roof is fine. I will leave that to your discretion. I'm fine with whatever you choose. Very well. 3 of the gargoyles fly back up to the roof. Vlad stays and speaks to Maverick. You were a sight up there. You, my friend, are very skilled. Do you want to fly with me before I retire for the night? Maverick answers with Jason's help. He says yes. The gremlin and gargoyle take off into the night. Well. Good thing I was here to defuse the situation. Jason says, smiling. Oh my god. Yup. My charm came through again. I know it is hard for a peasant like you to talk to royalty. I'm sure I would have been fine. I walk inside and slam the door shut. You're welcome. Jason yells from the other side of the door. I may shoot him in the ass yet. Story 20, Ghost Story Made My Dad Believe. Bit of backstory about my dad. He's not one to seek attention, make stuff up or over-exaggerate anything, and he's very illogical with everything. This is why I believe him. My dad says I think I was about 16-17 at the time, maybe living with my parents. I'd gone to bed just fine and slept well. Suddenly, at about 7 a.m., I felt extremely cold. I was shivering and felt unusually cold for the time of year. So I just wrapped myself in my duvet harder. Then it felt as if something had pushed down on my bed, as if someone sat on the side. He has a very small room, maybe 3 meters long and 2 meters wide. He was lying facing the wall when he woke up, and his head closer to a window with his feet close to the door. With nothing else in his room really. His room wasn't pitch black, but it was dark. He continues, I was scared. I closed my eyes and covered them in the duvet. It got even colder and I could see my breath as I was breathing. Again it felt as if someone was pushing down on my bed even harder than before. I had to turn over. So, slowly I turned over, making sure my eyes never were open or uncovered. Then I heard a beeping noise like a heart machine. Beep. Beep. Beep, just over and over. The weight lifted off my bed, but I was stiff, frozen with fear and unable to move. Suddenly, a voice said, "It will all be all right." At this point I knew I had to look. The beeping hadn't stopped. I peeped through the smallest hole I could and saw her. Here's where the room layout is important. Remember, the only thing by my dad's head is a window. So as I peep out, still shivering, an old woman walks out from by my door past my face less than a foot away. I hid again through fear. Then I remembered she couldn't have gone anywhere, there's only a window, so I looked again, she was gone. I got out of bed and ran downstairs to where my parents were. They asked me if I was okay and I said yes very dismissively. Then I just started crying. I told them there's someone in my room. I asked for them to get my clothes as I was just in underwear. My mom said, "Shut up, there can't be anyone in your room." But then told my dad to go and get my clothes. He spent the day out at work with his older brother. The next 2 nights at a friend's house and 3 nights sleeping downstairs until he could go back in his room. I'd never heard this, and that's why I believe him. He doesn't make stuff up. He has no idea what was going to be alright, but he doesn't want her to tell him. I have learned many stories from my parents over the last few days, so I can share more if you want.